OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
7:30 on this Wednesday morning. This is OTB AM. Eoin and Nathan with you right the way through until 10 o'clock this morning. And we've got a packed show coming your way between now and then. We're going to be building up to the All-Ireland semi-finals in hurling from about 8 o'clock. James Skehill is going to be breaking down both games with us from then. We will have Bobby Skinstad setting the scene for the deciding test in the British and Irish Lions tour to South Africa. And we will have reaction to that massive win for Boks in Europe last night, as well as the latest from the Tokyo Games. And we will be speaking to Timmy McCarthy, who will almost certainly have been enthralling you over the past week or so with his commentary of the basketball at the Olympic Games. So it is two great commentators of Ireland on the show today. Nathan, how are you getting on?
I see what you've done there, Eoin. I see what you've done there. I don't deserve to be mentioned in the same breath as the great Timmy McCarthy.
What's been your commentary highlight of the Olympic Games then? If you want to pick your brains and your expertise.
I like Steve Cram's commentary. You can tell instantly the greatness of something by the shock in his voice at what has just happened. And also for a former athlete to be that strong. I know Timmy was a former basketball player himself. Like Cram, such an elite athlete, to go on and be so comfortable in the commentary box. I know he has many hats and there's a controversy in that itself, but I like Cram at the athletics. I like Timmy, of course. I was in the middle of the Connacht final in the last 10 minutes as the French are about to beat the USM, flicking over going, a little bit of Timmy time, but I stuck with Mayo Galway. But yeah, it's been good. You've taken me away from the diving, which of course is my area of expertise. Too much splash.
It seems
too much splash.
It's like I'm getting it now. It's usually by the end of the diving where I'm starting to become an absolute expert in everything really, and I'm just like, those feet, just too much of a rotation there. And as I said, Tanya Watson has gone in and not too much of a rotation actually. She started pretty well here.
Not too much splash. First time there was too much splash. So second time you're saying not too much splash.
No, that's my. Actually, no, there was a little bit too much stuff. Now that I look at it on slow motion.
What would you score it on? Go on, give us what you would score it.
What's the scale here again? Let me just wait for the score to come up. She started really well. She's
flying it.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. And I guess we'll have Will O'Callaghan with us later on to give us his expertise on it, because Will O'Callaghan definitely seems more capable of, or maybe just knows these things better than we do, of actually getting up to speed and giving a really good take on all this sort of stuff better than we do. But we digress. We will get into that a little bit later on. We will tell you how Tanya Watson is getting on as soon as her round is complete. We should just touch quickly on what happened last night, Nathan, because Bows have had another phenomenal night in Europe. PAOK fell victim to their run in Europe last night. 2-1 was the full-time score, and this must be one of their biggest results in their history.
Yeah, fourth straight win in Europe for Bohemians, and not just one of the biggest results for Bohemians in their history in Europe. One of the great results, I think, in recent times for a League of Ireland side. And if they can go to Greece next week and finish the job, it'll be up there with anything that Dundalk have done, the Shamrock Rovers have done over the last decade or so in Europe. When you consider that Bows last night were ranked 380th in Europe and PAOK are 77th. PAOK are one of those teams that you just expect to see popping up in a Europa League that will certainly be expecting to go to your Europa Conference League. And by all accounts, listening to the reports afterwards, Bohemians disappointed to have conceded towards the end. 2-0 up, a couple of great goals from Matty Coote. Just really direct every time you see Bohemians in Europe. Again, it's not a negative style of play. There's an energy there, and the quality of the goals, as I say, particularly the run for the first one from Georgie Kelly and the finish then from distance from Coote for the second goal. They've given themselves a brilliant opportunity. Like, they are on the tough side of the draw because they are one of the unseeded sides. So even with a win next week, they go on and they play maybe Hibs in the last stage before getting to the groups. And remember, if you get to the groups, you're talking again about £2.5 million. They've already made a bucket load of money out of this. So they're on the unseeded side, much like Dundalk, whereas Shamrock Rovers are on the seeded side, and there's a massive difference where Rovers are playing an Albanian side on Thursday night, and if they win that, they probably end up playing Flora Tallinn of Estonia, and Dundalk have already beaten the other side from Estonia in this, so you would expect the Shamrock Rovers will qualify, but for Dundalk to hang on in there, it's been a good achievement to get this far, to beat PAOK, and if they can hang on over in Greece next week, this is a result we'll be talking about and hearing about for a long, long time.
You've been embedded in the south side of Dublin for long enough. Is this kind of rubbing you up the wrong way, the success of Bows?
Yeah, well, Bows are very much the force of good, aren't they, in the League of Ireland? And me being on the south side and, going to Shamrock Rovers when I once could and, immersing my family in that, I'm very much on the side of evil. But, evil may prevail and find themselves in the Europa Conference League if all goes well for Shamrock Rovers over the next little while. And I might be getting to enjoy some European football over the winter. But, yeah, Bows are... We should do another piece. I know we've covered them a lot. We've had Daniel Lambert on the show quite a few times, and obviously there's a big Bows supporter base in off the ball. But like what they have done to sell out 8,000 fans at the Aviva in the matter of minutes, because there's always a question, like, they're not getting 8,000, and they probably wouldn't have been getting 8,000 to Dalymount Park, but they've created a buzz around the club and around the north side. Not even just the north side. I think around Dublin of actually this is something kind of different, something I want to be a part of. And like League of Ireland clubs, it can't always just be about the football. Like Bows don't have the redeveloped Dalymount Park yet, so you're not going to go there thinking I'm going to get the 5-star experience. But you do know that when you can go back, you'll go there and you get something actually that's really enjoyable, that's quite organic, and that is maybe even a little bit alternative to your normal football outing. And they've capitalised on that brilliantly. They obviously have really good, strong people behind the scenes, quite innovative people, and then the manager in Keith Long. Somebody who can deliver on the pitch, even when, they lose some of their best players and Danny Mandrew ends up going to Shamrock Rovers. They keep bringing through new talent consistently. And like that, you go PAOK, like look at the quality of players PAOK had last night. Like Shinji Kagawa is the obvious one and a standout name as a former Manchester United player. But throughout that team, it is just full of internationals. Like Andrea Zivkovic played last night, came off the bench for Serbia in their last World Cup qualifier. Stefan Schwab, he's played for Austria at one stage. He scored the goal last night. Nelson Oliveira is one of those names that would have popped up consistently, who scored the goal. He has been part of Portugal squads for years. So there's any amount of internationals. This is a team that would have come to Dublin last night thinking, we're going to win. Absolutely, we are going to win this game. So it's a heck of an achievement. And hopefully at one stage, very soon, we get to start seeing these matches, because maybe it is a personal thing that I felt the League of Ireland was in a really strong position just on the verge of COVID. I know I was, mentioned a few times, going to Rovers on a Friday night, and the crowd was getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And if you think like probably the last big game was the Jordan Flores goal, and about 7,000-8,000 people for Dundalk against Rovers, there was such interest. And while League of Ireland TV has been great, like it just appeals to the hardcore, and we haven't seen a game on RTE since the beginning of May. And Keith Long touched on this last night. That is an awful lot of people. That's the floating voter who are sitting down and suddenly becoming experts in diving, who would love a little bit of football. And, the league runs on in the middle of the Euros, where the biggest games are on the same nights as games at the Euros. It doesn't help itself. But the fact that it's not been shown to the wider public, that the public aren't getting to see Shamrock Rovers at all, I think is, it's just really frustrating, I'm sure, for those around the league, when it felt as though they were on the cusp of something. So hopefully, if any of these Irish sides progress to the final playoff round, we will actually get to see the games live on television, because I think it makes a huge difference, because like League of Ireland TV is great. And listen, commentator top class in Bohemians last night with Stephen Doyle on commentary, but you want it to get to that. It needs to get to that wider audience.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll be touching on that hopefully a little bit later on in the show as well. It is 7:39, and just to let you know that OTB AM is brought to you by Gillette. Good mornings start with Gillette. Put your best face forward with their new and improved razors. Let's tell you what's coming up this morning on OTB AM. We're going to have an Olympics check-in in just a moment with Cathal Mullaney. He's been keeping up to speed on Tanya Watson properly and everything else that's been happening throughout the morning. Timmy McCarthy will be with us a few minutes later then to chat through the start to the basketball so far, and we're really into the business stage at this point. We're into the semi-finals. He was watching Team USA yesterday in the men's side of the draw, and then Team USA in the women's side of the draw this morning. They're both looking in exceptional shape at the moment, despite the early wobble, as Nathan mentioned, from the men's side of things. The sports page is coming your way at 8:10. James Skehill then up at 8:20 as we look ahead to the last four in the All-Ireland Hurling Championship. Bobby Skinstad then will be with us at 22:09 to look ahead to the third and deciding test in the British and Irish Lions tour to South Africa. And then from 9 o'clock we have more sports news, more updates from what's going on in Tokyo, and then Deal or No Deal with Nathan Murphy giving his take on everything that's happening from James McCarthy to Harry Kane. And then we'll close things out this morning with GAA reaction. So that is how things are lined up this morning. Delighted to welcome Cathal Mullaney to studio. Cathal, how are you getting on?
Morning, Eoin. How are you?
All good. So what's been going on this morning in Tokyo for people who are just waking up?
Yeah, so three Irish athletes in action at the moment. Leona Maguire in the golf has started with a level par round of 71. The Cavan native currently 5 shots off the lead that's held by Sweden's Madeleine Sagström. Stephanie Meadow is still out on course, just 1 over playing the last. She's made a couple of birdies in the last couple of holes there to pull it back. So Stephanie Meadow making her way towards par there. She's 1 over and that's playing the last. Now Tanya Watson is also in action. That's in the diving, making her debut at the Olympics this morning. In fact, she's had 2 dives already, currently on a score of 119.40 after her first 2 dives of 5. That's currently in the top 5 at the moment. The top 18 of the 30 competitors will make it through to tomorrow's finals. And then later this morning, Owen, 3 Irish riders have realistic hopes of a medal. That's Dara Kenny, Bertram Allen and Cian O'Connor. They've all qualified for the individual show jumping final. Action for that gets underway at 11 a.m. and Kenny qualifying in second position means he'll be one of the later starters.
That Tanya Watson first round looked incredibly safe from her, like in terms of getting her through to the next round. It's only when the difficulty starts to go up now over the next half an hour or so that obviously things will get a little bit more challenging, but a really encouraging start.
Yeah, you'll get a better sense of where she's going to stand once they obviously get into it and everybody's had their second dive. It's such a difficult sport to try and get right. It's so technical and you get a sense of that looking at the judges' scores there as well, just the small margins between doing quite well and not doing so well. But Tanya Watson making her Olympic debut, just 19 years of age, so a fairly encouraging start.
I can see the fear in your eyes, Owen. The fear that what happens if over the next half an hour, Tanya Watson gets into contention and you may have to somehow try and live commentate and give a level of expertise on diving that goes beyond just the splash factor.
But that's all that matters, isn't it? No. It's the scores come up on screen here. I will be providing a live service of what is happening in the diving. Don't you worry, people at home. If you're on the move anywhere, I will keep you up to speed as long as the score appears on screen. Cathal, what else is going on?
Yeah, elsewhere at the Olympics today, this morning, in fact, USA's Sydney McLaughlin set a new world record to win the women's 400 metres hurdles. The 21-year-old clocked a time of 51.46 seconds, which knocked 0.44 seconds off the record she set in June. The race was another classic as well, involving McLaughlin and rival Delilah Muhammad, with McLaughlin just about edging it to take gold. Muhammad actually also broke the previous world record and taking silver in a time of 51.58 seconds. And a number of finals taking place later today on the track as well, including the men's 200 and 800 metres. The 200 is off at 5 to 2 Irish time, while the 800 is a little earlier at 1:05.
Nice one. It's a brilliant day in store. That 200 metres should be an absolute classic. Like Knighton, the USA kid who kind of came to prominence a couple of I suppose last month when he broke Usain Bolt's underage record, is actually stepped up quite well to senior level at the Olympic Games, it turns out, and he's certainly one to watch in that. And that 400 metre hurdles earlier on, like what is going on with this event in across men's and women's? Just another absolute classic this morning, and this track is really raising eyebrows at the moment because records are tumbling left, right and centre. Like not overly similar to yesterday, but similar in many ways, which is somebody breaking their own record and then the second place breaking the old world record as well. Just some of the fastest races we've ever seen.
Yeah, you just wonder, is it the track, is it the shoes, are the athletes just getting better? It's probably a combination of all three. But the track and field is just brilliant to watch. I mean, it's just unbelievable and Wallstrom yesterday, and then that race this morning, it's brilliant. And as you say, those ones later on are ones to look forward to as well.
So that is Tokyo, I think, rounded up for today. So what else is going on? Yeah,
well, to reflect on a great result for Irish football in Europe last night, Bohemians will take a 2-1 lead to Greece after another sensational result for the club in Europe last night in the Europa Conference League. Ali Kout scored in either half as they beat Greek giants PAOK in front of 8,000 fans at the Aviva Stadium. That was in their third round qualifier first leg for the Europa Conference League. It's Bo's fourth consecutive victory in Europe, and the sides will meet again on Thursday week. Meanwhile, in the same competition, Linfield lost 2-1 at home to Folesh of Luxembourg. Billy Chadwick struck in the 9th minute there to give the hosts an early lead, but second half goals secured a 2-1 win for the visitors. Elsewhere in Europe last night, there's work to do for Rangers if they're to make the Champions League group stages. That's after they lost to Malmo in Sweden. Stephen Davis scored a stoppage time goal there to give them some sort of hope, but they did lose 2-1. That's in the first leg of their third round qualifying match. And if they win, they'll play Greek side Olympiacos or Ludogorets of Bulgaria to reach the group stages. And just as well, the Women's National League last night saw some action. Goals from Anya O'Gorman and Lauren O'Callaghan helped Peamount establish a 3-point lead at the top of the table. They were 2-1 winners at home to DLR Waves. Elsewhere last night, Galway picked up a first win in 6. That was after a 2-1 victory at Athlone. Tonight, Shelburne can pull level on points with the leaders with a win at home to Bohemians, while Treaty United entertain Cork City.
Cathal, great stuff. Thanks a million. Is that it for this morning, or is there more stuff going on?
Yeah, we can give you a line as well on Gaelic Games, just to round up the news last night from our Armagh. Kieran McGeady set to stay in charge of the county's senior football team. A 1-year extension will bring the former All-Ireland winning captain's tenure with his home county to 8th season. McGeady's side exited the championship this summer at the hands of Monaghan in the Ulster semi-finals.
Good stuff. Colin Mullaney there, keeping you up to speed on everything that's been happening this morning. Nathan, I just want to get your take on one story before we go to Timmy McCarthy this morning. It's on the back of the Irish Sun here. It says, Thrill 16, terrace open for Dubs versus Mayo. The GAA intending to reopen Hill 16 to fans for the first time in 18 months on the weekend of the All-Ireland Senior Football semi-finals. The fixture that weekend, Nathan, is Dublin versus Mayo. If I've ever seen a sign of the Dubs being spooked, this is it. They need the Hill. They feel they need the Hill to beat Mayo.
Get as many of them in as they possibly can. The more Dubs, the better, is how I always look at it. So are Mayo people going to be allowed in, or is it Dubs only? Is that how they're separating? It's not a 2-metre distance. It's just no Mayo people allowed inside the Hill. No, that's just fine. Listen, I think I can speak on behalf of all Mayo and Dublin supporters and say we're all going to enjoy that semi-final, enjoy our day out, because we all know really we're just there in advance of Kerry's procession to the All-Ireland final and the All-Ireland title. So yeah, it's sort of a silver medal playoff, isn't it, Eoin?
Yeah, it's phenomenal to see it though. But silver medals are important as well. Like we celebrate silver medals in the Olympic Games, and I'm sure Dublin and Mayo people would celebrate their silver medal as well this year. So it's nothing to be too ashamed of, Nathan. Right at 7:47 on this Wednesday.
That was ended quickly, wasn't it? word come through from Peter, did it?
Yeah, exactly. Quick, shut up the Kerry Mafia WhatsApp group going 90 this morning. 7:47 on this Wednesday morning. It is time to turn our attention back to the Olympic Games, because I am delighted to say we have got Timmy McCarthy with us, who you will have heard commentating brilliantly as ever on Team USA and men's and women's and all the other teams taking part in the basketball throughout the course of the last 10 days or so. Timmy, good morning to you. Thanks a million for taking the call.
No, great to be here. Looking forward to having a chat.
You're just off air, I believe, watching a bit of Team USA killing Australia earlier on.
Yeah, it was probably the most devastating performance I've seen by a women's team in my 5 Olympic Games. The USA came out in the first quarter and were awesome. I mean, genuinely, they were phenomenal. And I mean, they're the top-ranked team in the world and going for their 7th Olympic gold in a row. But the Australians are ranked 2nd. Now, they're missing their star player, Liz Cambridge, but they had no answer. The Americans was just devastating. And it's funny watching it and commentating on it, because the game just peters out, but you've got to stay with it, obviously, and stay commentating it and just enjoy the talent that was on show. And definitely this morning, the women's talent from the USA was just brilliant to watch.
Like, who was the standout this morning? Like, I saw Brianna Stewart racking up an incredible score.
Yeah, Brianna Stewart had 23 and Brittany Griner had 15. Now, Griner's interesting because she's 6'8" in height. She wears a size 18 shoe. Bigfoot is her nickname, and she was just so dominant on the boards. She was defensively, she was brilliant. Offensively, she has a really soft touch for such a tall athlete. But Brianna Stewart is to me the classy player on show, because she won 4 NCAA titles with UConn. So from her freshman year to her senior year, they won the NCAA in UConn the 4 years running. But what was even staggering was she was MVP for the 4 years. So the belief is that she is actually the greatest college player ever in American history. And right now on target to probably be one of the great WNBA players behind the likes of Lisa Leslie and Diana Taurasi stuff. So Stewart was the star of the scoring, and Greiner was the star of the domination, which sort of highlighted the gap today between the Americans and the Aussies.
It wasn't so easy for the men yesterday morning as they got past Spain. Possibly that could have been the gold medal match if the draw had gone differently. Like, there's an argument to be made that Spain are the second best team in this competition, but the USA seem to have recovered extremely well from their early stumble.
And you're right, it wasn't easy yesterday. I mean, the Spanish were interesting yesterday because the Spanish are the second best team, and it could have been the gold medal match, but Spain lost to Slovenia, which ultimately got them this draw against the USA. The USA have recovered. There's no doubts from the French defeat in the first game. But I still think they're vulnerable. I still think this USA team are vulnerable. They have only two centres and not really dominant centres in the sense of Adebayo and Draymond Green. So they're more power forward. So physically, the Spanish had a big height advantage, just say. But if you're a Spanish fan listening in, or if you're a Spanish team member, when you have five players of the standard of Marc and Pau Gasol, Rudy Fernandez, Alberto Albalde, and Alex Albrinas, who had averaged between 10 and 12 points each per game, to be scoreless in the Olympic quarterfinal, you're not going to get it done against most teams, and definitely not against the Americans.
Yeah, I guess they made up for it a little bit with Ricky Rubio going off for a good section of the game. And I guess there is a certain element, maybe over the last two Olympic Games, that we're starting to see the impact of the NBA being a truly global league in the competitiveness of the Olympic Games.
We saw that first, I think, explode on the scene in 2004 with Argentina winning the gold and beating the Americans on the way. And you had Manu Ginobili and Luis Scola. But Ginobili probably was the big star internationally at that point in time. But since then, it has exploded. And this has all come about as a result of the 92 decision by the Olympic Council to allow the Americans to bring the professionals in. There's no doubts that the Americans' influence has transported around the world. But there's no more foreigners playing in the NBA than at any stage. And they're performing in the NBA. I mean, Luka Doncic right now, the big discussion in the States at the moment is he the best player in the NBA? Or is he in the top three in the NBA, behind obviously Kevin Durant and James Harden? So they're the big questions. That would never have been the case. Even when Ginobili was at his best and Tony Parker, the French guy when he played with San Antonio, were never at their best, and guys like Sabonis, they were never considered to be at the top echelons, where now Luka Doncic is now being talked about in the USA. Some experts would say he is the best player in the NBA. Some other people would say that Durant or Harden are the best. But the fact that international players are now at that level in the NBA means that when you get to competitions like the Olympics, there's a chance more consistently now for the Americans, particularly in the men's game, to get toppled.
And there's a perfect opportunity for Luka Doncic to answer that question this weekend.
Yeah, and we're covering that game tomorrow. Slovenia and France will be the game that RT will be showing in the semi-final. And, France are undefeated. They're toppled the Americans. I mean, they have a stacked load of NBA stars, and they have the New York Knicks, Frank Ntilikina, who hasn't played, only a couple of minutes. He picked up an injury, so he's coming back into it. But I think that Slovenia have just got a brilliant basketball team. Without Doncic, they're exceptional from my point of view. They're great shooters. They're typical Eastern Europeans. And there's a stat that I haven't used yet, so I'll actually give it to you, which I think is fascinating. America has 330 million people. Argentina has 50 million people. Spain has 50 million. Germany, 80 million. Okay? So all the big powers have huge amount of population. Slovenia has just under 2 million people in its population. That's about 25% more than Dublin, if you think about it in a population sense. And they're now in the final four in the Olympics. They're European champions, and they've created a phenomenal basketball team. And at the moment, one of the two biggest superstars in the world in Luka Doncic. So from a small country, you can actually achieve big things. And I think that Slovenia have shown that. In a sport where you wouldn't expect a team or a country of that size to be dominant, I think Doncic will lead them to the final. I really believe that they've got the talent to beat this French team. But it won't be easy, and it could be a cracking game tomorrow.
Timmy, you touched on Kevin Durant. I've been right in the conversation when you're talking about the best players in the NBA right now. As the leader of Team USA at this Olympic Games, how has he responded to the shock of that defeat early on to France? Has he really stepped up over the last week or so?
Well, in the first game against France, that defeat you talk about, he picked up fouls early and he struggled. And in the next 2 games, now they were easy games. They played Iran, and Iran are not a good basketball team. So they had a very comprehensive win against Iran by over 60 points. So, you can't judge on that. But in the game yesterday against Spain, Durant was at his absolute best. I mean, he really stepped up. I mean, he's the leading scorer in American history. He's made more field goals in Olympic basketball in American history. After each 3 games, Carmelo Anthony had all these leading stats. I see actually overnight he's signed for the Lakers on a free trade to team up with LeBron. So Melo had all the advantages, but he played in 4 games. So Melo was the leading scorer. Durant is now the leading scorer. Melo was the leading free throw shooter. Durant is now the leading free throw shooter. Melo was the leading field goals made. Durant is now. So he has stepped up. But yesterday he was at his best. He was ruthless yesterday. I mean, he hit 4 threes. He was dominant all over the floor. Defensively, he was brilliant. I mean, he's 6'9". He moves like a gazelle. He shoots with the softest of touches. So he has definitely stepped up as the leader. But they need him because some of the other guys, even though they're so talented, I'm not convinced in the stretch, in the real difficult situations, that they would be able to pull them out if Durant doesn't step up. Because if you go back to 2008 and 12 and 16, when the Spanish, really put up the Americans in those 3 Olympics, it was the late Kobe Bryant in 2008 and 2012 who pulled the Americans out of the fire in the 4th quarter. And it was LeBron in 2016 and Durant together pulled them out. I'm not sure if Durant doesn't perform in the remaining semi-final, and if they get to the final, have the other guys who can actually really dig down deep enough. And that's where I see their vulnerability. They're still the best talent, but the big question is, are they the best team? And that will be answered over the next 4 days.
As somebody who's watched your coverage of the basketball over the last few games, I definitely think KD gets you as excited as any other player in the games. Although there's a close contender this year, I feel. Damian Lillard, I think, is getting you very excited, and Dame Dolla, as you're calling him, and that's your latest catchphrase, Timmy, on a phenomenal player and a phenomenal point guard.
I love him. I love him. I just think that Lillard is the complete point guard. I mean, first of all, his shooting action is so pure. I love watching pure shooters. And he's just got the most beautiful, purity in his shot and the extension that he gets. Obviously, he's a great athlete, so, he can extend. But he handles the ball so well. He's a great passer on the floor. So he excites me. So himself, as Dame Dolla is what, I think that's his R&B name that they use in the States. So he really excites me along with KD. I think KD is the best player right now in the game. I just think that what he has, his ability to deliver, I just think he's the best player. But Lillard has the chance to be, in the next period of time at that echelon. But Doncic, to me, is the complete player as well. So they're the 3 that really excite me. The rest of them I enjoy watching, but they bring me to a different stratosphere with the talent that they have and the way they execute it in big situations. Yeah,
it would just be so good to see them all on the court together going for the gold medal before this thing is out. Just in terms of your own commentary, Timmy, over the last little while, I think that there's always new people who become more familiar with it every 4 years or 5 years, as it is in this case. Can you take us back to maybe the first Olympic Games that you did, the kind of development of some of your catchphrases, the boom shakalaka to the downtown? Do you remember developing those phrases and actually coming to prominence on that front?
I do. I remember the 2004 games in Athens, and I arrived to carry out the role of being the analyst. So my role with RT up to 2004, I was the analyst. So I was the person who would analyse the game and would give the technical explanation of what was going on. Because obviously, as a former international coach and international captain, I've played at that level. And on the first day I arrived, Jack Kenny was to be the men's commentator and Sean O'Sullivan was to be the women's commentator. I was there in advance of them, and there was a women's game on between the Czech Republic and Spain. And the director said to me, "Look, we're running ahead of schedule. Will you go in and commentate on that women's game?" And I said, "I've never commentated." I said, "Just go in and commentate, and look, we probably won't use it, but at least if we had to put some time in." And I went in, and it was a really exciting game, which went to overtime. And I just started commentating, and the next day they said, "Well, I'm going to become the commentator." And Ger, who's a good friend of mine, was very generous and said, "Look," he was happy for me. And then Sean had to take the role of analyst. And words like coast to coast and downtown are basketball sayings. They're words that we would use regularly in basketball. Boom shakalaka just came out of my mouth on the first dunk I saw, with the excitement of it in the games in Athens. And, you know, it has stayed. And as my commentary, as I've got more experience over the 5 Olympic Games, what I do as a commentator, you know, when I was an analyst, my job was to inform about what was happening. Was a zone defense from man to man? Was, you know, should they go inside? Should they play outside? Should they look for fast breaks? Give the technical explanations. But as a commentator, I believe my job is to inform and entertain. And, you know, I mean, I love sport. I love commentating on all sports. I've commentated on GA, I've commentated on golf, and obviously basketball is the most prominent sport I've commentated on. And I want to bring the passion that I have for the sport, and I want to bring the information that I know about the sport. I think what gives me advantages in basketball is that I played at Olympic and European and World Championship level. So as a player, and I've coached at that level. So I understand what the coaches are trying to do, and I understand what the players are trying to execute. And then my passion and my enjoyment of seeing the best in the world perform at their best when it matters is what obviously comes out. And thankfully for me, most people seem to enjoy it.
And I think one thing that's becoming really evident during this games as well is that yourself and Sean O'Sullivan have this great relationship with one another on air, where both of you are just getting so unbelievably excited about what you're seeing, and that really translates to the viewer then, who feel that excitement as well. It seems that the two of you almost make each other more excited the further the game goes and the more crazy things actually get within a game.
I have a great relationship with Sean. I've known Sean all my life. He was a former player with my own club before I became a senior player. Sean was on the senior team, and we've developed a very good relationship off the court and off the cameras over the years, personally. But on the games and the commentary, you know, it's a good match because, you know, Sean comes in with points at different points in time in the game, which complement obviously what I'm doing, and he has a different view on the game, which is very important. So he's not just, you know, saying what I'm saying. You know, he has his own view on how basketball should be played, and I believe that comes across. So it works really well. I mean, it's some people call it the dynamic duo. Some people call it other things, maybe not as complimentary, but it does work well in the context of what's there. And we love doing it. And, you know, like, we both say to each other, you know, at the end of every Olympic Games, you know, how do we get here? Like, you know, how honoured I am and how humbled I feel to be, you know, commentating, you know, for RT on these games. And, you know, it really is humbling for somebody to be at these games as a commentator, watching the best in the world, and realising like that, I'm a lucky guy. I'm getting to look at and commentate the best players in the world in the Olympic Games, and I just love doing it.
Do you think... Sorry, go for it, Nathan.
Sorry, Timmy, I was just going to say, you're obviously just after coming off a commentary. With the time difference, do you find it straightforward to bring the usual Timmy McCarthy energy to a commentary at 3 a.m. or 6 a.m?
I do, actually. It's funny, you know, it is... when people meet me, you know, outside of the commentary and even in conversations like this, you know, they don't associate this voice and the voice that they hear on television. And when I get to the comment, once I'm, you know, ready for start, I just go. I just really go with it. And, you know, and even in the last game, where really from the first quarter, the game was over, I was as enthusiastic in the 40th minute, you know, for the final basket as I was in the first minute when it was a nail-biting game. It's obviously more enjoyable when it's nail-biting, and most of the games in these games have been very tight. But I just, you know, I got a great lesson from the late Jimmy McGee, who said to me, you know, when I got the gig in Athens, he said, just be yourself. You know, learn from others, but just be yourself. And I've just tried to be myself in my commentary in any sport that I've done over the years. And I get up for it every time. That's the key. You know, so when I'm involved, I'm at it, and I'm giving my best of myself in each commentary I give. So yes, whether it's 3 a.m. in Irish time, or whether it's, you know, 8 in the evening in Irish time, I'm going to give the best I can for the 2 hours or so that I'm commentating on each of the games.
You mentioned there the size of Slovenia a few moments ago, and maybe all they do is play basketball and cycle. Maybe that's all they do. But do you think it's a pipe dream to think that one day you might commentate on Ireland at the Olympic Games?
Oh, I don't think that's a pipe dream at all. I think that, you know, the opportunity for Ireland, you know, and it's a long journey. But I mean, I can remember my final year and playing before I retired. I was captain of Ireland, and we played in the European Small Nations in Malta, and we played Iceland in the first group game, and we beat them comfortably. And I got injured in the semi-final, so I missed the final against Iceland. And Iceland actually beat us in the final. And they're now in the top echelons in European basketball, and we're still in the small nations. So, there's so many Irish-American players in the States. Pat Connaughton, who played with Milwaukee and won an NBA ring, has said publicly he would want to declare for Ireland and play for Ireland. So there's a lot of talent available to us internationally in the American side, and obviously our own Indigenous players. So at a future point in time, you've got to get through the European Championships to qualify, obviously, or the qualifiers. But it's possible. It's not going to be easy, but it's possible. Because if you go back, 25 years ago and said Ireland would win a gold and bronze medal in rowing at the Olympics, people would have laughed and said, not a hope. And we've done that in 2021 for the games of 2020. So you never know. It would be brilliant to do it, but it will take a lot of work. But I do believe it's possible, because in what I've learned over the years from my own sporting career and now looking at it from behind the camera, everything is possible if you pay the price and stay long enough with it. And that's the challenge for Irish basketball.
Yeah, it would be amazing to one day see it. Timmy, it's been great catching up with you. Can't wait to see KD and Damian Lillard and Doncic on court before the end of the week and you commentating again. So thanks a million for taking the call, and best of luck with the rest of the games.
Great to talk to you. I will see you when we get back. God bless you.
Cheers. Timmy McCarthy there on the line with us. Right, so just to remind you, we've got the OTB Sports Olympic show live from 5 o'clock every evening throughout the Olympic Games across Off the Ball. We'll be bringing you the biggest stories of the day and also take a look ahead to what's to come. It's all brought to you in association with Indeed, who are proud to support Team Ireland at the Tokyo 2020 Games. Indeed believes the world works better when people are given every opportunity to unleash their true talents, and the hashtag is Talent Unleashed. I can tell you that Tanya Watson is in 14th place after round 2 of the 10-metre platform diving. So we will keep you up to speed on that as the
a bit more detail on. Can we get a bit more detail on the difficulty and how it all played out?
Facts only. I'll leave the colour commentary to you and Timmy McCarthy. I'm a facts guy, Nathan. That black and white is all I see.
Certainly something.
We are going to be chatting hurling with James Skehill. We're going to have Bobby Skinstad actually with us to look ahead to the third test of the British and Irish Lions Tour, and we've got a special Deal or No Deal coming your way with Nate Dog Murphy after 9 o'clock. We'll be back after these.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
Have you subscribed to the OTB Football Podcast? If not, here's some of what you've missed over the last week.
I didn't want to be part of the homecoming back to Dublin when we got back from Korea back into Dublin. I just wanted to get away from things.
Get yourself on YouTube and just put their plays on a loop. The violence that they tackle with is just absolutely brilliant.
Well, so far you've heard my voice, but then I brought 2 friends along. Next on the mic is my man, Jer. Come on, Jer, sing that song.
David Weiler.
Subscribe now to the OTB Football Podcast stream wherever you get your podcasts and download the OTB Sports app.
Sean, what's that thing going round the garden?
That is our new Husqvarna Automower.
Automower?
Yeah, it's a robotic lawnmower from Husqvarna. Cuts the grass automatically, has GPS tracking and an app. Even works in the rain. I just thought, why spend time cutting grass when I could spend it with the family?
Great! You can put the dinner on, so...
No can do, love. Have to paint the man cave.
Husqvarna Automower. Never mow again. Learn more at husqvarna.ie.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
Tanya Watson has just completed her third dive. She has hit a 2.5 back somersaults, good pike position and good water entry. It's the lowest difficulty of all her dives, and she's going to be slightly disappointed with her score of 52.2. I'm definitely not reading that off RTE's live blog. I'm definitely using my own keen eye to judge the dive that I just saw. She was inside the top 18 cutoff point after her second round. It's not looking amazing for her after that, but we shall see, and we shall judge all the other divers, Nathan, and see if they can leave her off with that. So she was in 14th after round 2, and top 18 basically qualify. Is that good enough for you, Nathan?
That is comprehensive. I'm now fully on top of what's happening.
Good stuff. Well, I'm delighted for you. Let's bring you through some of the papers this morning, and we'll start with OTBSports.com. The Canes have blinked first. How Daniel Levy is winning the War of Wills. Coot Brace secures another famous Bohemians European night. The culture is not what it was. Billy Joe Padden and Johnny Doyle were talking Dublin. Expect more of the same in the third lines test, suggests Niamh Briggs. And Monaco claims striker racially abused in Champions League tie in Prague. So that is OTBSports.com for you this morning. You can get all those stories first on the OTB Sports app. The Irish Sun here in front of me first. Hakuna Matata. Top of the morning to you is the headline. It means no worries as Kelly claims bronze, aims for gold. Thrill 16, as we mentioned there already, that they're going to open the hill for the All-Ireland football semi-finals. Long way to go, lads. That's Keith Long's message after their brilliant win last night. And then there is the latest on Harry Kane and James McCarthy there as well. The back page of the Irish Daily Mail. Time wasters is the headline. Gatland cries foul on Boks delay tactics, and no catching gypsies. Wiley Coote is the headline on Bows beating Pauk 2-1, and medal hero Harrington turns focus to semi. That is the headline from the boxing yesterday. The Irish Daily Star leads with the special ROM. Chelsea will offer former star 15 million euros a year to rejoin. And Italian job for Jason Knight is being tracked by a Serie A club that is tipped to lodge a bid for his services before the summer transfer window closes. The club is unnamed, so maybe that gets revealed over the next little while, who knows. Just very quickly then, Shirty weekend. Harry will miss training for days as bitter Tottenham standoff drags on. That is the Mirror. The Examiner is winning smile, bronze medal secure. Harrington sets sights on golden moment. The Irish Independent then goes with Ali packs a punch for brilliant Bows, and Gatland turning to Aki to up the ante as he rings the changes. The Herald then goes with Ali is simply the greatest. Coote double has Bohemians in Euro Dreamland against Greek giants, and McCarthy looking forward to paradise after Celtic move. So that's a flavour of some of the back pages this morning. At 12 minutes past 8 on this Wednesday morning, it's time to turn our attention to the weekend's hurling. Delighted to welcome James Skehill back to the show. James, how are you getting on?
Good now, and how are things to do?
Yeah, good. So, semi-final weekend, like the last couple of years, ever since they've changed the format and put them on the same weekend, they have almost always delivered. They've always been brilliant games. We'll start with Limerick against Waterford this Saturday at 5 o'clock in Croke Park, obviously. We always try and clutch at straws, James, when it comes to any slight weakness that we might be able to find in this Limerick side. Waterford, they may be knackered after the last few weeks, but is there a world in which they manage to get that early lead and hold on to it, or are Limerick just way too accustomed to actually trailing by a few points in the early exchanges?
No, I think Waterford are in a great position. I myself have doubted them 2 weeks in a row, so I'm not going to call this game too closely. But they've got to the front, so they hit the front early against Galway, and they kept the lead for an awful lot for the whole course of the game. Barring a 5-minute period against Tipperary, they did the same. Waterford came out with the traps fast. They scored 5 of the first 6 points. Hit for a couple of sucker punch goals in 60 seconds, but clawed their way back into it and got the lead after the water break in the first half and maintained that lead. I think Waterford are going to have to bring massive energy in definitely the first quarter anyway, and try to get ahead as best they can. Because what you don't want is for Limerick to just, I suppose, stay in the fight too soon when you kind of throw your best punch, if you know what I mean. But Waterford have a great thing going for them on that they're extremely efficient. So what I mean with that is, like, if you consider the second half against Tipperary, where Tip had 9 wides, and kind of sucked the life out of themselves a small bit. Waterford only had 1 wide, and that was the wide that Bennett took on the sideline near the end. So their shooting is fantastic, and they're getting shooting from all over the pitch. So their half-back line is scoring, their midfield is scoring. They have a broad range of scorers, so they're not over-dependent on 1 or 2 guys to do the damage for them. So I think if Waterford come out early, set themselves into the game as soon as they can, and just be efficient in their shooting, they're in for a great shout.
And are you noticing them taking on safer shots at all by any stretch of the imagination, James, or is it literally just accuracy and the basic skill set that Waterford have seems to be far improved than we expect?
A safe shot to me would be inside 50 yards, but that'd be classed as a safe shot, where I think they have more time. So what they call that safe or not, I'm not sure. I just think that what they do is they're getting themselves in really good positions through support runners.
Right.
So when you see attacks, there's 3 or 4 guys on the attack together. The next thing is the ball popped into space, and that person has good time to shoot, which then results in efficient shooting. So if you get, if you're within inside, realistically speaking, nowadays 70, 80 yards, and you have a couple of seconds, 3 seconds really to set a shot, you should be scoring. You know what I mean? It's when you go beyond that distance and go further that the shots tend to waver. So I just think they're they're extremely efficient, and they've got great shooters all over the pitch who are on their good sides. So, for example, Callum Lyons on the 5 side, he seems to be a really strong right-sided player. And how often have we seen him come down that channel and popping over pints like there's no one on him, you know? So, and again, they're creating great opportunities at great times, and they're getting guys up on the ball. We'd have often spoke about Leeson, even back, if you go back to the Waterford Galway League game a long time ago, where he was placed at number 6 and it didn't suit him. And what they've done as well is they put Bennett into number 6. And when you plug one hole, it nearly plugs a few holes for you, if you get me. So, like, what has happened is Bennett's gone into 6. He's settled up the half back line. And now Gleeson can show forward to his, probably his best position, whereas by kind of call it a free roaming forward. So that appointment, if you like, to Bennett at 6 has worked really well in Waterford's favour, because it's resulted in Ozzie Gleeson being up the front for them as well.
That free roaming forward then, James, does Limerick have a template for that sort of player, if it's a talismanic player who does have a free roll up front?
Yeah, see, Limerick traditionally wouldn't, like, normally if you're 9/10 of teams, let's say, would play Waterford and say, well, the first thing we need to do is we need to man-mark Jimmy Byrne and we need to man-mark Austin Gleeson. I actually don't think Limerick care about who they play. I think they have their set defensive system. They play predominantly zonal play with their 2 wing backs who you generally don't see Kyle Hayes in the 5 wing. You know, you don't see Jimmy Burns in the 7 wing. You don't see Jimmy Burns number 6. So they play predominantly zonal. So I honestly don't think they give a hoot of who's coming near them. If I was to do a matchup, you'd be saying that Jimmy Burns would be best suited to Mark and Ozzie Gleeson, because then it won't take away from the Kyle Hayes attacking. And also, I don't think Liam Cathal would actually would like to see Ozzie having to mark Kyle Hayes, because then Ozzie would have to turn into a defender. And the last thing you want Ozzie Gleeson doing is going back towards his own goal. So I think what you'll see is a Limerick setup on the weekend whereby they play zonal. I think someone will pick up Ozzie when he comes into certain areas and channels, and they'll just try to do what they always do, which is completely crowd out that middle third area and create a war zone as such. And then just when he gets the ball, limit his time entirely, you know, because he's going to pop up in the half forward line. He's going to pop up in the full forward line. I think when he comes into those positions, you'll see maybe a Jimmy Burns, a Sean Finn, you know, Will, I don't know who pick him up just for intermittently, say. And Limerick are so well drilled that they can hand over players and they can interchange. It's hard to explain over Zoom, but they can interchange guys without too much fuss. So, like, you'll see there was a lot of talk at the weekend about the goalkeepers coming out for Monaghan and for Tyrone, and the effect that was having on the defensive systems and why are they free, etc. But I just think Limerick can transition a marker. So, like, a guy can go on Jimmy Burns and he can transfer that marker over to Will O'Donoghue without too much fuss and without too much what would you call it, structural ramifications, if you get me. It doesn't do any effect to the team. That's just down to their training, and they're so well drilled.
James, how much would Waterford learn from watching back the first half of that Munster final and what Tip did to Limerick and what Tip exposed in the Limerick defence? Like, do you think they found something that other teams, a bit of a template, or was it that just Limerick were so slow out of the blocks and that's, listen, for a team of their quality, just not going to happen again?
Yeah, I think two things happened there. I think one, a big thing, I know I'm not trying to be negative, but they didn't start Aaron Gillane, you know, and he's like Aaron Gillane is, I'm not going to say he's probably one of the top corner forwards in the country, but he's a great outball. So he does the same job that Dessie Hutchinson does for Waterford. Like, you can throw him into the corner there and he'll gather for you high, low, and he'll hold up the ball and say, at least he'll get a shot off, you know. And I say, when Limerick didn't have Aaron Gillane in there, they weren't getting, I suppose, the rewards they have for the amount of balls going to the corners. And that was no reflection on Graham McCarthy as such. That was just, I suppose, the type of two different players, two stark contrasts in their style. But Tipperary then were so efficient, again, I keep using that word efficient, where every ball they struck went to hand. It was very, very surprising, because you normally see teams make errors, you know, a few errors, but Tip, everything stuck. So everything went to hand, all the stick passing was good, hook outs were perfect. And they just created a small bit of pandemonium up in the forwards, on their forward line, where they got a lot of long deliveries. Limerick were slow on the breaks, and then Tip just got a bit of luck with a couple of goals. Is that a game plan as such? I think for a period, yeah, to try it for a few minutes and see how it goes. But if Limerick are dominating breaks and that type of ball, stop. You know, just kind of rethink your process again. What Tip also did was they created an element of confusion through Jason Ford, Noel McGrath, you know, that kind of Dan McCormick a bit, let's say, where they were interchanging amongst themselves in midfield and the half forward line, and it caused a small bit of, I suppose, unrest for Limerick in the first half, and that got firmly fixed in the second half. So that was going back to my earlier point, whereby if Waterford try that, I think Limerick have seen it, they'll be able to counteract it a bit better. And I think if Waterford, a big thing for Waterford to get ahead, they need to do three things. I think if they get ahead, they need to be extremely efficient. So you remember the Tipperary game, whereby there was a whole plethora of shots that went wide for Tip in the first half. That lead they had in the first half could have been 6-7 more when you consider all the shots they had. So if you get shots in open space against Limerick, you're going to have to take them, and you're going to have to be operating an efficiency rate of 85%. So like 8-9 points out of 10 shots. You just have to against Limerick because that's the type of team we're facing. The ball use has to be perfect. You can't allow any stray balls. You can't allow any turnovers. We see the Garrett Hegarty and Aaron Gallant turnover against Tip resulted in the Seamus Flanagan goal. And you need to, I suppose, really not concede goals. So you can't allow any goal to win against Limerick, because if you get a lead in them whatsoever, a goal to Limerick, especially when it comes from one of their big players, if it comes from a Flanagan, a Lynch or a Hayes, it's nearly worth 2 goals to them and their crowd, and keep their crowd down as best you can. And look, the big thing for Waterford is stay in the fight. I know they're going to be out 4 weeks in a row. It's going to be extremely difficult for them on the energy side of things. But again, they've surprised me against Galway. They've surprised me against Tipperary in the sense that I kept waiting for Waterford for their legs to die. When you consider that it was the 3rd week in a row last week, Tip were coming last week, and I just kept waiting for the Waterford fitness levels to, I suppose, suffer. Like, as you would imagine, it would suffer over the course of 3 high intense games, but it didn't. It didn't, and that's the big thing for me now is can Waterford stay in the fight for the full 80 minutes? Over the course of 2 halves, because Limerick are going to do it. You saw it against Tipperary in the very, very hot weather. They didn't die an ounce. So Limerick are going to come with energy, and just can Waterford stay in the fight.
I presume you start Aaron Gallant this weekend?
Oh, without question. Yeah. Oh, definitely, yeah. 100%. You put him in there, he's your best forward. He's your best inside forward, I'd say. That's and like he's your free taker. He's an extremely efficient free taker. So like when you go to club games, if you have a good goalie and a free taker, you're halfway there. You go to intercounty games, if you have a good goalie, a kind of a good structure and a good free taker, you're halfway there. So like I don't see Aaron Gallant. I don't see a situation or a world where Aaron Gallant doesn't start the weekend. I think not that they have much to learn, but I think the Limerick management have learned that they have to start Aaron Gallant.
Yeah, it was a strange experiment maybe to actually try and find that out. Like just on the Waterford side of things, there's going to be like an interesting discussion in the off season, regardless of what happens with Waterford this year, but especially if they lose, say, this weekend, about Liam Cahill and about the possibility of there being a vacancy in Tipperary. How do you see that playing out over the course of the next while? Do you think he could potentially be Tip manager this time next year? Yeah, I think there's every potential in it. I know when I spoke about Galway after their defeat to Waterford about a couple of retirements, I would probably expect 1 or 2 retirements in Tipperary as well. I do think they need an injection of youth, because their average age of their team is 28, 29, and they've been on the road an awful long time, and they owe Tip nothing. But I think if you're going to get an injection of youth, you're going to start a full rebuild in structure as such, and is Liam Sheahan going to do that? And I could be completely wrong here, guys, but I just don't see him doing it. I don't see him taking on the mantle of a rebuild. And I think when you look at what Liam Cahill did with Waterford, and there was a bit of controversy, to be honest, when there was, I think in Noel Connors and Mara Shannon, when he effectively released them, when he took over the panel without even seeing them, and people were going, what's he doing? These are 2 Waterford's best guys. But he's rebuilt the Waterford team, and he has them as serious contenders, And I think Tip historically will nominate from within. So if Sheedy does go, I can't see a situation whereby Liam Cahill's not manager for Tip next year. Only if Sheedy goes. I don't think there's never going to be a situation where Tipperary are going to ask Liam Sheedy to step aside. It's not going to happen. It'll be on his own terms. He deserves that. He's delivered success for them in minors and seniors. So that's if he wants to step away, or wants to keep the job, I think he'll be keeping it. Until such time as that happens, or doesn't happen, should I say, then Liam Cahill is the man for it. Because Tipperary, they nominate from within. So if it is going to be Liam Sheedy stepping aside, Liam Cahill, I think, is definitely your manager. Definitely. I think he was, if memory serves me correctly, he was the guy touted for the job because he had such success with Tipperary under 21 prior to Sheedy coming on board. So I think if you were a betting man, you could be saying Liam Cahill for manager next year. But you get the sense here that Liam Sheedy, if he's going to sign up for next year, he's kind of signing up for a few years, because next year is when the rebuild begins.
Yeah, I think, and because sometimes I said it also about Galway, like it's strikingly similar situations whereby, if you're the next manager, nearly has to be invested, for the next, I'm going to have to say 2 years, minimum 2 years, and at least to try and kind of, I suppose, blend in an element of youth into each squad, because they're kind of on this. both Galway and Tip are kind of on the same trajectory in the sense that they've had, great talisman, and now they just need a bit of youth. Again, if Sheahan takes on that, he's going to have to try and sign up to the contract for 2 or 3 months, or 2 or 3 years, excuse me. And Eoin Cathal, you can see him on the sidelines, like he's got a massive amount of energy. You really think he wants to tug out himself, just maybe that's something that Tipperary needs. They just need an injection of energy. Now Sheahan is very energetic himself, but he has his soldiers, and I think a couple of those soldiers step aside, he might step aside himself.
Did you think over the course of this season that those soldiers had enough backup to allow them to actually become impact players? Because I guess that could have been maybe the defence of Liam Sheedy this year, that maybe he didn't fully trust some of the younger players because either they weren't proven or they're just not good enough yet. Yeah.
Well, from initial viewing, you'd say no, they didn't have enough backup. And the reason being is because if they had enough backup, that backup would be starting. Now that's the thing that comes to my head straight away. There's a reason Richie Hogan and Walter are on the bench for Kilkenny. Because the backup that they have, is good enough to carry the fight for 50 minutes for Kilkenny and then bring in the likes of Wally Walsh. We saw that against Wexford. I think in Tipperary's instance, I think that the Seamus Canlans, the Noel McGraths, Paul McGraths, they're still the best players on the Tipperary squad and still offering the most. Because if they weren't, they'd be somewhat pulled out, And it's one thing blending youth only when you think about into a team, but you need a fine balance of experience also. Because if you're in the hunt immediately and you have a young team that are unproven, untested, it creates a small bit of instability in a team, Whereby when you have the bit of experience and a bit of the old dog, let's say, on the pitch, you know that they've been through tests and they can get through hard times. So that's why it's always a fine line for managers when they try to blend in youth, don't want to blend in too much youth, So I think Jake Morris was a step in the right direction for Tip, but slowly it's baby steps down there, I think.
Yeah, it seems that way. Like the point you make there then brings us nicely on to Sunday's game, Kilkenny against Cork. It's 3:30 in Croke Park. That blend of youth and experience seems to have been something, I'm not sure was it deliberate or not, James, but it's something that Kilkenny have nailed at the moment. Yeah, I agree. And the youth they have, I mentioned this before, they don't come across, some of them, as the most beautiful, stylish hurlers, let's say, who would fit the Kilkenny mold. But by God, they're effective. I mean, they're so effective. Their backs, they're going to meet a Cork team now who are essentially, let's call it flying high a bit. There's a lot of positivity down in Cork from a hurling perspective, where they're challenging minors. They've won 20s. They're another 20 final. They're going first well as senior, and so there's a bit of a train coming from Cork, let's say. And we know they're going to be seriously effective in the next couple of years when those 20s transfer up to seniors. But right now, Cork, they're riding the crest of a wave, and the worst team that can beat is Kilkenny, who are brilliant at, I suppose, mixing hurling and mixing the fight, putting the dog into the fight, you know what I mean? Or having the fight in the dog, should I say. And I think it's the right matchup. I think Kilkenny are quietly confident, if I'm honest. I think they prefer to have gotten Cork as opposed to Waterford. The Cork play a more traditional style, I say, but they play kind of a similar to what Waterford have adopted in a running game. And, Kilkenny have had to adopt that themselves over the course of the last couple of years to try and keep up with the pack. They would have always been an orthodox 15 team, Kilkenny. You'd never see sweepers or flipping three men midfield lines. They'd always gone 15 on 15 and kind of had a beat us if you can attitude, which was sufficient when they had greats, a whole host of great forwards, midfielders and backs. Whereas right now they probably have to adopt a new style to overcome certain systems they face, So I'm very interested to see how Cork will respond, because if you remember the Dublin game at the weekend, there was 10 minutes in the very last 10 minutes that Dublin, they were coming and they were narrowing the gap and they got it down to 4, and just the Cork legs started to waver. There was a small bit of panic. So when Kilkenny come at you for 80 minutes, I'm interested to see how Cork going to respond. And again, that blend of youth in Kilkenny and that blend of experience coming off the bench, so they're going to be in the game for 80 minutes. Walter Walsh is going to come on if he doesn't start and make an impact. So it's how Cork are going to overcome that and keep the pace of Kilkenny for the whole duration.
Do you think that'll be part of Brian Cody's game plan then, having watched that performance against Dublin, that they, as you say, their work rate was massive, Cork, for the first hour, and then there was a dip. They just couldn't keep it going. That actually Brian Cody, knowing that it's impossible for them to improve on that really in the space of a week, he can say, you know what, my bench, I'll unload it, and that is the game plan. That'll be the winning of the game. We're happy to be level with 10 minutes to go because we know we have that strength and depth.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it is. I think he'd be looking at the Cork team and say, right, how do we get them out of their comfort zone a small bit? What do Cork do really well, and how are we going to upset them? So, like, you know, when you see Cork lads in a load of space and they're coming down the wing and popping over a ball, next thing you hear the rebels chat, you know, that's what you hear out of the crowd, and it's because, you know, Cork are flying high, they're popping balls over lads' heads, and they're running around like marcheers. That's not going to happen with Kilkenny. You know, what's going to happen is Cork are going to be hitting them out, and it's going to, how are they going to respond? So he's going to make it as much of a dogfight and an absolute war for the course of 50, 60 minutes, and then unload what he has in the bench and see can Cork handle it. And that's the big question for me coming out this weekend, or going into this weekend, should I say, can Cork handle that over the course of 75 minutes? Can they stay with Kilkenny's fight? Because of all the teams in the country, probably bar Limerick, Kilkenny have the best fight, the best internal fight, if you know what I mean, whereby there's never say die attitude, and they just keep on going and going and going. So I think would it be a tactic per se? I don't think it's a tactic. I think it's actually ingrained in Kilkenny, whereby they just go after you, you know, from the off, and they never stop. So I think they're going to try and exploit that at Cork's expense, and it'll be interesting to see how Kilkenny will, you know, react to Coleman coming forward, Tim O'Mahony coming forward. You know, who'll track them and who'll hit them, and how will they manage, you know, the likes of Flynn, who's been a really good addition to the Cork squad, and Horgan, because like Horgan's going to get you your 10 points from frees anyway, but can you limit him from play entirely? And can you limit Seamus Harnedy from puck out? So all those things, I'd say that Kilkenny would look at them and say, right, we're going to take them away from Cork.
Punching Cork in the mouth is something that Kilkenny did a couple of years ago when they played that game in the sun. I think it was in 2019, when I guess the preview kind of felt a little bit similar, James, when I don't know, there was this sense that Cork maybe might be able to get one over them, and it just didn't happen. So like over the last 2 years then, have we seen Cork develop, I don't know, is it an edge, is that what they require, or an ability to be able to withstand that punch in the mouth?
Yeah, I think like firstly, Kilkenny, like Cork haven't beaten Kilkenny in the semi-final in over 45 years, like more. You know what I mean? Kilkenny have only lost 5 the rest 26 semi-finals. So Kilkenny aren't used to losing semi-finals. Whereas Cork haven't won Ireland since 2005. And like they've lost a couple of semis since. The last time they were in Croke Park was against Limerick in a semi-final, whereby they acquitted themselves really well and went to extra time, and probably could have only for a Nicky Quaid wonder save could have picked the game, you know. But they're a different team from them. Like I know 18 doesn't seem that long ago at all, but in terms of team structure and team rebuild, Cork have a completely different, I suppose, first 15 or squad, if you like, from 18 to where they are now. And I just think that the youth that have come in, a good lot of youth, with the blend of experience that, as I touched on before, has been a really good mix. Can they take the punch in the mouth? I'm going to have to say at the minute, it remains to be seen. Like I'm going to say they might not, you know what I mean? Because I think sometimes you have to lose one to win one. You know what I mean? I know that wasn't the case in Limerick's case, but I think Cork are going to have to will grow massively this year. Their game plan is relatively new. Like it certainly seems like yesterday they played Limerick down in the league and got destroyed. Their game plan got destroyed, but they've stuck with it and they've developed it over the course of the last couple of months. And now I think that they're getting the fruits of their labour somewhat. But doing it in Croke Park against the Kilkenny team that's it's well seasoned with their history and their management is a different proposition. And I'm shouting for. I'm not shouting. I'm calling for Kilkenny on the weekend. I think they're going to do it against Cork, and I just think that Cork will learn a lot from this year, and that what you'll see is next year will be a huge stepping stone again in the right direction for them.
The thing is, Cork probably do have an ability, James, to maybe blow a team out of the water. Maybe we haven't seen evidence of that just yet, but their goal scoring prowess is something that you point to and say, right, that's something that could do a lot of damage to a team.
Yeah, like they've got great pace, and when you consider their corner forward, they're Coughlin inside. Like as soon as he gets the ball, you can feel the excitement from the Cork crowd that they know he's got pace, and they're just kind of they're edging him on to go for the black spot. And like generally when he goes to the black spot, like something happens. Either he gets the goal, or like you see in this player, or he gets fouled. And he draws something over it. And like when you have a guy with such pace who can secure the ball, who can take on a defence, can make something happen. Again, it creates energy and adrenaline for the team. It creates energy and something to shout about for the crowd, and like that now they've got the most amount of goals over the course of the Championship League out of anyone. So that was always a thing. That was a chink in Cork's armour over the last couple of years. But they didn't have a Jack Coughlin in the last couple of years. He was too young effectively last year to make a real impact. And here he is now, one of their main go-to guys. And him and the likes of deep line runners from Flynn, Meade, Kingston, O'Mahony, those guys coming through are creating a bit of havoc for goals. I think what you'll see is a you'll see a packed out defence against Kilkenny, whereby they're not going to allow deep runners, or they're going to, I suppose, give Jack Coughlan some of their undivided attention, to put it that way, and try to stop the goals. Because if you stop goals against Cork, I think you go a good way of taking them down, and like, again, as I always say, goals breed energy breeds, success for a team. So stop the goals for Cork and you go a long way to beat them.
What was the most extraordinary example of undivided attention you and your teammates would have felt against the Brian Cody team?
Ooh, against or for? What we've given or what we received?
What you received.
What we received? Oh, well, I'll off the ball or on the ball. Let me see now.
Feel free to give any instances of times you inflicted it on them as well.
I think, like, you'd have always been trying to look at them. You have to understand, Kilkenny were so strong going back years ago, that, like, you could try something. It was trial and error every day. You maybe got 1 or 2 opportunities to play them every year, and every day felt like a trial and error. Right, we'll try this today. Okay, that didn't work. Now we'll try this today. Okay, that didn't work. And part of that then was try to rough them up as such shows. Sometimes that didn't work. They were so strong, so physical. You could try to take them on. There was probably a semi-final or quarter-final against them in 0-7, whereby we had them in Croke Park, and we went toe-to-toe them, and there was a bit of a tension given to their half-back line with Tommy and with JJ. I think Eoin was marking Tommy that day and gave him a bit of a couple of hugs and kisses, to put it that way to you. And like Galway were well within the fight, but then Eddie Brennan popped up the devil with 2 goals to sink us. Like, so you could do that. You could fight them for 95% of your time, and then the last 5% they'd catch you. And that was just them at the time. And look, you had to match them in hurling. That was the only way you could beat them when they were going well. Try and match them in hurling and physicality. Whereas I think now they've got a different type of mix. They've got a different blend. They're not as well, I suppose, they're not as feared, if you want to use that word, as they were in the past. So again, I have no particular instance that comes to head. I get off the line now and sure, like, I think it's 2 or 3. I'll come back to that one.
It does tie in with what you're saying about, can Cork take a punch? Like, you knew with that great Kilkenny side, if you could somehow go toe-to-toe with them, that you could take a punch. Now, there was very few that actually could, but like, I'm sure Cork players, if they were watching here, or Cork supporters, is thinking, well, this is, as you said, a relatively new side who are progressing, that maybe haven't had the opportunities yet to take that punch and show that they can take it. Like, a game like this can change everything, actually. If they can stand up to Kilkenny, we look at this Cork side in a completely different way. When you do think back to dressing rooms you were in, like, is there a common feature of a team that can take it and a team that can't? A team that can step up physically when it matters and a team that can't?
Yeah, I think when things go well for a team, it's very easy to look good, and it's very easy to have the energy to keep going well. And it's just when things start to go a bit awry and the wheels are coming off a small bit, like, can you stay? Again, I use the word for Waterford against Limerick. Can you stay in the fight? So if Waterford have a good, or Cork, have a good start, and next thing they get a lead, and they're beginning to get clawed back to Kilkenny, the next thing they get a sucker punch of a goal against them, and if Kilkenny begin to get a roll of a couple of scores, can Cork stop that and then come back with their own fight? If they do that within the game, so if they get ran against and they're going down a couple of points and they can stop the rot and then turn around and run back at Kilkenny and throw a few of their own scores or get a goal, you know what I mean? Then Cork are going to stay in the fight. It's when they're coming down the stretch in the second half and the game is in the melting pot, a bit like Kilkenny and Wexford in the Leinster Championship, and Kilkenny are beginning to turn up the heat a small bit and actually just finish it off entirely. Can Cork do the reverse and keep in the fight and make it a dogfight for 80 minutes against Kilkenny? That's when you know them. If that happens, you know then that this Cork team is around to stay. If that doesn't happen, you'll have to maybe, I won't say go back to the drawing board, but at least you'll be questioning their impact in this year's championship. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, so it's when Cork get punched. Can they punch back, or are they going to lie down and keep taking the punches? Do you know what I mean?
Is that a whole team effort, or actually is that where 1 or 2 real leaders can step up and actually drag everyone else through?
I think it's a decision before you even go out. I think you often hear this word work rate. Like I heard a coach before. I was on the sideline listening to a coach, and he said the work rate was a skill. Like, and I never heard such BS. Like, work rate is not a skill. Like, work rate is for me is a decision. You know what I mean? You decide you're either going to go after them or you're not. And it's easy to go after them when things are going well for you. But when things aren't going well for you, can you keep the work rate going? So if you're 19 or 20 on that team, if you're looking for someone else to do the job for you, you shouldn't be there in the first place. You know what I mean? So I think of course, let's say people will look at a couple of the big players and they look at Harnedy and they look at Hogan and go, right, what are he going to do for us now to get us out of this jam, they say. And they will have to give their fair share. But Patrick Collins is going to have to be deadly in the goals and hit all his puck outs. Downey fullback is going to have to marshal that square as no tomorrow. Timmy Manning going to have to keep doing what he's doing for 75 minutes, keep running forward and making hay against Kilkenny. All those things attribute to a team who can, I suppose, challenge for honours. And like, if things go bad for Cork for a period, for a course of a few minutes, it's up to them all. It's up to the management. And when people come off the bench, the subs, I'd always say to our subs that, like, you don't just come on to fill the gap or just to replace the guy who's tired. You're coming on to make a severe impact on the opposition. So if that's taking a guy for a run or hitting him with a shoulder or, put him down on his back for a couple of seconds, that's what needs to be done. Do you know what I mean? So it's a case that the whole 30-man panel and the whole management and everyone is rolling together and say, that's it, enough now, and just get after them. Put in the fight for 80 minutes, regardless of what happens. That's the true test of a good team.
You say that Kilkenny perhaps aren't as feared as they once were, but do Limerick fear this Kilkenny team more than anyone else in the remaining three teams that they could play?
Do Limerick fear them, is it?
Yeah.
I would say Limerick don't fear Cork at all. I would say Limerick will be, slightly concerned with Waterford, but they beat them last year's final by 11 points, which was only 8 months ago. So would they fear Waterford? I'm going to have to say no. The last time we played Kilkenny really effectively in a heated battle was 19 semi-final, was it? It was the 19 semi-final. So, and they got beaten. And they got beaten by a game plan. And they got outworked. So I would say, to answer your question on fear, no. Concern, yes. Slight concern. That I think they've done it just before. Momentum is one thing. We talk about momentum over the course of a season, but also you have to think against an opposition. Like if you've beaten them a couple of years previous, you still have momentum against them. You still have it. Yeah, we've beaten these guys, and the key thing is you've ticked the box and we can do it. If you haven't done it, that's a different question entirely. Then you're asking, is our system going to work? Are our players good enough, etc. But when you have done it, you can do it. And I'd be very interested to see that, especially in a final. Final is different to semi-final. Semi-final is just a course. It's just a case of just trying to get through it and get to the final. The final, anything can happen, and we've seen, in years previous with teams who were supposed to win semi-finals or supposed to win finals, they didn't. So that'll be an intriguing matchup if it does turn out that way.
Can I throw one at you, James, before you go?
Throw away.
Davy Fitz to Galway.
Davy Fitz to Galway.
What do you think of Shane O'Neill if he doesn't come back?
No.
Not a runner.
Not a runner for us. I think what Galway need now is say if Shane O'Neill does decide, and again I think he deserves respect to Shane. I think every manager does to decide his own future to a certain extent. I think if he does step aside, I think Galway will have to nominate from within. I think that's what's needed before. I think we'll have to look at getting someone who has worked with the youth or worked in the club structure for a period and see can we try and bring in some of the young guys and try build a new team as such for over the next few months. And I don't think Fitzy's the man for that. I think he'll come in and look for an immediate injection and try to cure something with the team he has there. You know what I mean? Because again, it's a bit like we said about the Liam Sheedy and Tipperary. Whoever comes in is going to have to be signed up for 2 to 3 years to do a full rebuild, and will have to be nominated from within to get a full grasp of who you have, both from from a club structure and from players. Because like everyone looks at county players, but you could be missing someone inside. You could be missing a guy that's going well for his club because he has been on a minor team or has been on a county team. So I just think it's going to be someone from within, guys.
James, enjoy the weekend's hurling. Great chatting to you.
Okay, folks. Thanks.
James Skehill there on the line, looking ahead to All-Ireland semi-final weekend in the hurling. Now, we are going to be joined by Bobby Skinstad in just a moment to look ahead to the third test of the British and Irish Lions tour to South Africa. First, here is Niamh Briggs on what the Lions need to do to win the final test.
Yeah, I would have probably had Josh Adams on the other wing and Watson on the right. I would have also maybe looked at putting Liam Williams on the wing and keeping Stuart Hogg, even though I know he had a really bad game. I just think the type of player that he is doesn't have 2 of them in a row, and he's and also a leader. I don't know if it's a case that the likes of Sam Simmons and Finn Russell are on the bench that they're going to change the way they play. I think from the first test, I was sure when I saw Ali Price starting that they were going to move the ball and move it real quick.
Yeah.
That wasn't the case. They still kicked a huge amount. So I don't know. And I think when you put Bundy in there, you're putting him in there to be physical and to carry. You're not putting him in there to be able to play ball.
Yeah.
And so I'm not sure it's going to change too much.
Because I suppose the thing is, South Africa now will sit around and say, right, we're back. You know, we've the 280 minutes under our belt. We clicked in that second half. We know our game plan inside out. We're starting to remember our combinations under a lot of pressure. Ill-tempered affair, stop-start suits us. Same again next week. The Lions have what? How many? 2-3 pitch sessions tops? I'm not sure if you can suddenly reinvent the wheel. I'm not sure if you can suddenly work on 5 starter plays that we haven't seen thus far. I suspect the Lions will come out and play in a pretty similar way and hope that you start winning a few of those aerial duels and that shifts the momentum in a big way. And maybe Russell is there as a last gamble if we're 5 points down with 10 minutes to go. I mean, I'd be really surprised if we start seeing the Lions play to the edges now. Maybe Ali Price suggests they might try and do it.
Yeah, no, I'd be the same as you. I'd be very surprised because they had Ali Price in the first test and they didn't really play much to the edges either, I think. But I think for the Lions this week, their liner has to be better. Their scrum, they have to get platform off that. But for me, it's the big carries in the field. They have to be able to try and hit a soft shoulder in some place or other, whether it's a case of there was loads of situations when I watched the game back the second time that in those big carries of those forward pods and Dan Biggar's shadowing in behind them, there's a huge amount of space out in that width, but they never look to use it. And I think they've got to, it's almost like a game of chess. You've got to show them one picture and then move it to another, and you've got to be constantly being able to do it, and you've got to be able to do it on a run, and you've got to be able to do it with no time. And I think that's what this test series is. That's what the Lions are. It's the best of the best, and you're expected to be able to change things and move things. I just don't know whether they have not the capability, but I don't know whether they have the okay to do that from their coaching ticket.
Niamh Briggs speaking to Joe Malloy on last night's Off the Ball. You can catch that back on our YouTube channel or on the OTB Sports app. And we have brought you every Lions match to date live and off the ball, and it all comes to a head this Saturday at 5 o'clock. You can hear the crucial third and final series deciding match live on News Talk. Our coverage will be brought to you in association with Vodafone, lead partner of the British and Irish Lions. To look ahead to this, delighted to be joined now by Bobby Skinstad. Bobby, good morning to you.
Good morning. How are you guys?
All good. There's been a lot of talk here in Ireland of how dull an encounter it was on Saturday and how poor a spectacle it's been so far. You must be absolutely loving this Lions tour.
Well, I mean, I think some of the provincial games were fantastic, because it's more free, there's less pressure. However, the pressure in the test matches has related or sort of imposed that sort of that stress and that pressure of trying to not make mistakes as opposed to playing a free and open game. You're right.
Why have the Lions then been the ones who succumbed when the pressure was at its most intense in the second half last Saturday?
Well, I don't know. South Africa did the same thing in the first week. So everybody's going, the Lions, now it's all over for them. I think South Africa had a game plan which they stuck to. In the first test, the Lions were able to overcome it. They were very good, with their interchange, with their strategic sort of introduction of players onto the field. Their bench introduction was classy and worked very well. South Africa's didn't. And in the second test, the opposite was true. South Africa's opportunity to introduce some players off the bench, to maybe tweak where the players were playing. I mean, Pieter-Steph du Toit went off, but Mostert I thought was brilliant at lock, and then moving to flank, he's just got a serious engine. And that allowed that sort of bench to work. So I think I don't think the Lions can turn around and say, well, it's all failure for us, because there was some really good things in the first half. But they've made some changes. The big question is, do they change the style of game that they play?
If you were a Lions supporter, would you be a little bit concerned about the lack of a plan B that they showed on Saturday?
Well, it's funny. I mean, it's a good question. But when you pundits are sort of picking the starting lineup that you think the coaches are going to go with. I know they've gone with 7, I think it is, Welsh players into this team. I had Josh Adams and Liam Williams in my starting lineup originally. I had Bandiaki in there. I had Sam Simmons on the bench. I started with Faletau at that stage. But, you know, these are players who I think deserve their spot. They deserve a crack. So there's certainly nothing wrong with the quality of personnel. It's just whether they're going to change the game plan or change how they play. And if they do that, they better get it 100% right, because South Africa are you know, they're organised defensively and they're ready for the game to try and open up, and then they will put as much pressure as possible on a team that are going to try and spread the ball if that's the case.
Can you explain why you would have had Adams, Williams and Aki in your starting team even before watching a test match?
Well, I just think Aki brings, you know, he's got a good physical game, but he's also got a good distribution. Him and Henshaw together have got more tests under the belt. And then Adams and Williams, I think, would have been more effective in that aerial battle. And I knew South Africa were going to kick some up and unders from the base and from Pollard. And I felt that, you know, there's a lot of pressure on players coming in who haven't necessarily won the aerial battle in their own domestic competitions. But Williams is a very, very good sort of catching and running and even counter-attacking fullback. So and then Josh Adams was on form. So I thought that was good. I thought Bandiaki showed some really good form in the game that he played too.
How difficult a task is it for Warren Gatland and his coaching staff if they are to go with a different game plan? Because I presume from a South Africa point of view, even with the injuries, it's a straightforward week for Rassie Erasmus. Do it again, lads. It's won us a World Cup. It's got us level in this line series. We know our game plan inside out. For a Lions team to have to almost rip it up and start again with probably a couple of training sessions, players through 2 tough tests, it feels like it would have been one of Warren Gatland's greatest coaching achievements if somehow they can come out with a different game plan and be effective on Saturday.
Yeah, I think that would be too difficult almost. I don't think we'll see wholesale changes into the way they play, but they will have to be more effective. I think we'll see a lot more of what we saw in the second half of the first test. You know, the effective carry is more important than allowing players to be out sort of isolated on their own, where South Africa can steal the ball again. So we'll see pockets and pods of players, and I would imagine you'll see the big, strong guys like Adams and Aki being introduced into crashing the ball up off the set pieces, back of the line-out type thing. We saw some of that in the second half of the first test. So tweaks, I think, more than wholesale changes. If there are real wholesale changes, then absolutely they'll have to get it really right.
Warren Gatland is not happy with the Springbok time wasting, Bobby. I'm not sure if you've seen his quotes, but in the paper this morning he's saying we had stud changes, we had TMO decisions, we had referees stopping the game for cramp. So that will be one of the things I talked to about the referees this week. It felt that at every scrum there was an injury slowing the game down. I think there was something like 14 minutes of TMO time in the game, and we've worked pretty hard from a conditioning point of view, but it was really, really stop-start, and that made it frustrating from us. Was that a tactic from South Africa, do you feel?
I'm sure it must have been. I mean, I think South Africa would have really felt that they would have needed every second of rest that they could get. It's a bit like running the clock down in a football match, you know, the last 5 minutes, or a hockey match, or a game where you can't really control those open plays. What is it? Someone told me the total game time was sort of 2 hours and 15 minutes. I mean, that's extraordinarily long and far too long. I'm sure they'll be able to cut that down a little bit, but I do think South Africa will try and control the time as much as they can to keep themselves fresh and to keep themselves in the game. So it'll be a battle. I'm sure the referee will be told to be hurrying them up, and then the players will be told to slow it down. So there'll be a frustrating battle on that front. But I would imagine it's because South Africa feel that the Lions are probably in better nick. They've played more games. They've had a domestic season, etc. And the South African players would probably need a little bit more air in their lungs, and we'll try and find ways to get it.
So I was going to say just on the two coaches that, like, traditionally around big sporting events, when it comes to mind games, to the victor the spoils, and if you win, that everything that went before is justified. I'm just wondering about the thoughts in South African rugby about what happened last week with Rassie Erasmus, because it does feel, even though they got the victory, South Africa, that it's left a particularly sour taste. We know that World Rugby are investigating, a feeling that going at the referee and the officials time and time again for over an hour in one video just really overstepped the mark?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure that South Africans would feel exactly the same. I think you're probably right in terms of, there will be sanction and there will be some intervention from World Rugby. I watched the video back actually, and I think he makes 27 points, which is a lot, and it's something we can laugh about. The funny thing is, 26 of those points, he's probably right. So someone's got to say it at some stage. Is it the right thing to say in the middle of a test match? The end justifies the means, I suppose, and it will be his argument. As an ex-South African player, I've often felt that we have borne the brunt of some of the officials. I feel that there's that as one thing. The other thing is we need to really get it right with head high tackles and monitoring that area, which is something that he brought up. Is the South African public going to say that Rassie is incorrect and it leaves a sour taste? I think it depends on the results on Saturday. If he goes away and wins the match and changes perceptions of the South African team, then it's a moral victory as well for him.
So this has been a long-running thing, that this feeling that South Africa have not got a fair crack at a whip when it comes to a lot of referees.
Well, I think there have been incidents in games where South Africa. I mean, the most famous one recently was playing England in England when Owen Farrell had 3 or 4 head high tackles, and South Africa could have beaten England in the last couple of minutes, and he didn't even get a penalty, let alone a yellow card. And everyone said, well, hang on, there's 6 examples of him not using arms over the last couple of weeks. Why not against us? And that sort of ran as a bit of a meme, I think, for a while. Obviously nobody's played for a while. I haven't really felt that from the South African public or the players for a while, but that's possibly because they haven't been playing. But also when they've played, they've won. So I think there's less moaning and less complaining about that. And Rassie Erasmus was maybe trying to influence that as much as he could.
It does seem Rassie has an incredibly long memory, and he's incredibly good at creating a siege mentality that the players respond quite well to.
Yeah, I think he does. I mean, in terms of the actual length of his memory, I think he's one of those, what do you call him over here, rugby nose. He just loves every aspect of the game. So he'll pick on little bits that can make you better as a player. He'll pick on little bits that can make you better as a team. And he'll make sure that you see those kind of things and use them to get better. And he's very, very detail oriented. Has been for a long, long time. Even as a player, he was detail oriented. So I think that's a sort of a skill set of his that we'll see for a long time. Doesn't matter where he coaches. I'm sure the people in Munster will say that that's what he was like. And I've heard a lot of players say it was refreshing to have a coach who was so into it and so absorbed by making them better as players.
I got to say, I'm loving Rassie as Waterboy and just the energy he brings. And maybe because it's not something we always see, there's a peculiarity about it and you want to know what sort of an impact he's making. Like, do you think actually having a coach of that experience, those quick words he can have with players during the water breaks, during the stoppages, which, as we said, there's been so many of them, do you think they can have a proper impact on what the South Africans are doing on the field?
Oh, I do. I mean, I've spoken about it for years in terms of the messaging from the coaches to the players, and quicker, more concise messaging would be so much more useful to the players on the field. I think Rassie is in direct contact with the box, or the coach's box, and then direct contact with the players, and he can translate a message very quickly at a little circle. He can say, guys, you need to shore up the blind side, or change from 6-man to 8-man, or 6-man to 4-man lineouts, or whatever, where usually a coach would take, there are about 3 levels of people that he's got to go through, and it usually gets a broken telephone and the message doesn't always get straight there. So I think Rassie's sending a very clear, concise message quite quickly.
Like, it will be interesting, won't it, to see what the impact of this Lions tour is on the game over the next little while, because you would assume, Bobby, that there will be more influential water boys. There may be more of a process trying to influence the referee as well publicly, if this is the big rugby event we all know it is.
Yeah, they could be. Big events like this are often change aspects of governance, aspects of organisation. I mean, look at this tour would have changed how people manage players in a bubble, traveling with COVID. There's a whole host of things that'll come out of this. And those points that you make are valid ones. I mean, I think it will affect certain parts of how the game and tours are managed in the future, certainly. And we know that this Lions team is good enough to win the series. And we know that the South African team is good enough to win the series because we've seen displays from both of them. So whoever comes out on top will have a smidgen more of that influence because they've managed to use it to their advantage. So absolutely, it's all to play for.
It's incredible it hasn't happened more often because coaches are obviously generally such egomaniacs and want to micromanage to such an extent that actually having that close contact access to the players pretty much every minute of the game, I'd imagine many of them are going, well, if Rassie Erasmus can do it, why can't I?
Well, I mean, look at NFL and basketball. The head coach is right there. He's chatting to his team every second of every match. The head coach can talk directly to the quarterback in NFL. So they've got a hugely important relationship between the two of them. And maybe this is a step in that direction. I'm not sure. Maybe World Rugby stamp it out and say that you can't do that. And the coach needs to leave the team alone after Friday afternoon and the Saturday is all about the players on the field. Maybe they don't. Certainly we'll see innovations from parts of the world that are under pressure. And because of the pressure of this Test match series, we've seen some innovations and some attempts at innovation from Rassie Erasmus. And I think that has got to add to the game. I mean, it's fantastic.
Just a couple of other things before we let you go, Bobby. Could you try and describe to us, from your view, what it would be like to go up against that South African pack? And in particular, that South Africa back row at Mostert in there this weekend. It is absolutely ferocious.
Oh, look, to be honest, as a loose forward, I'd be running and hiding from those guys. They're big and strong. I like the fact that he's gone with Visa. He's given Visa another sort of crack at 8. He hasn't brought in Dwayne Vermeulen. It probably just means that he hasn't passed a fitness test. Khaleesi, I think, has been one of the standouts of the series. He's in his own quiet way made so many contributions, just little tackle contributions, carry contributions, drive contributions, and he's leading the tackle stats. So he's just been outstanding. And then Mostert has done very well at lock. And then when he moved to the flank, he was outstanding. He was everywhere. So I think it'll be a very good, balanced, loose trio. Lotte Jager coming in and starting really helps us on our line-out woes. He's been very, very good here in the Premiership in the line-out, and I felt he just showed a lot of maturity when he came on and bossed the line-out. So, that whole tight five and the loose forward pack have been doing the work. I think this final test, Rassie's message will be nobody gets to win a Lions series without doing the work in the final test. Nobody gets to knock him over and win this game without doing the work. So we'll see an uptick in the amount of work the pack does, and that scares me. If they get through solid work, they'll be hard to stop.
It would be another massive achievement for this group as well to become world champions, then to barely play a game because of COVID and to come back and to win a Lions series. If this was the All Blacks, we'd be raving about their greatness. But because of maybe South Africa's style of play and the fact that a lot of people feel it's quite dull or even boring, they don't seem to get the same level of respect that another country would for what they're achieving right now.
Yeah, I think it's a good point, well made. History is written by those who make it. So I think these guys will write their own words about this. And if they knock the Lions over and prove that they are a team who can win a World Cup and then back it up, their proof sheet says they've knocked the Lions over, then people can say what they want. They'll be a proud group with a proud group of fans. And their style of rugby will have proven to be successful. So I'm not sure that they'll worry too much about the way that they do this. I know that they'll worry about the individuals making sure they all make their contributions.
They can write their own version of history via a 1 hour Rassie Erasmus video message, put in a time capsule for the future. Call this one for us, Bobby. How's this Saturday going to go?
I think it'll be tighter than last week, but not as tight as the first week. I'm calling South Africa by 6.
Right, good stuff. Bobby Skinstad, always great to chat to you. Thanks a million for taking the call.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Cheers. Former Springbok there, Bobby Skinstad. setting the tone nicely, I think it's fair to say, ahead of Saturday. It's going to be a fairly tasty encounter again, to say the least. It's going to be live here on Off the Ball, on News Talk. It's something we've had for the last few weeks. It's been an intense series, a series with plenty of different storylines going into it, and obviously plenty of Irish interest going into that on Saturday. The one thing we didn't ask, of course, is about Mornay Stein wearing the number 22 jersey, and a little bit of, I don't know, PTSD from a Lions supporting standpoint, where it's like, God, is this guy, even though he hasn't been capped since like 2016, going to come off the bench and actually do something special yet again? Well, all will play out over the next couple of days and on Saturday.
Is it possible, Eoin, that the Lions just aren't very good? Like, is this a great Lions squad? This is a great Lions team? It's not a team that gets you excited really in any way. Usually when you're coming around the Lions tour, and I know COVID and all of that, and it's been an unusual tour, but like, it is the coming together of four nations and the excitement of seeing the best of the best. Whereas you look at that 15, you go, it's a bit bland, isn't it?
Is that because of the squad selection? I wonder, like Cathal was getting a lot of credit after week one for picking power rather than maybe, I don't know, maybe over quality. That's a little bit harsh, because those two things aren't necessarily, you can't divorce those two things.
Yeah, he probably hasn't been helped by whether it's injuries or form, particularly probably what happened with Saracens hasn't helped things. That, like, to go into a deciding Lions series and Owen Farrell not to be even in the squad, I don't think many people would have predicted at all. And, you know, Conor Murray obviously isn't in the best form of his life right now. It just feels that generally when you go on these tours, there's something that really grips you, and there's so many, the joy of seeing the best English player come together with the best Irish player. Whereas, you know, like, aside from, you know, maybe the second row right now with Itoje and Wyn Jones, like, nobody is performing anywhere near their best. And yeah, I'm just struggling to get as excited by that Lions team as I ordinarily would. But listen, Warren Gatland has shown again and again and again that somehow he has a way of eking out these games. But if they lose, God, it'll be interesting to see what the fallout is, particularly from those English players, when you've got 7 Welsh starting and 3 English.
Well, there's a lot of people always in the wings when Warren Gatland does anything, being like, well, Warren, you got your comeuppance, and then generally he tends to not suffer that fate because he tends to do quite well. But yeah, I think you're right. I think if they do lose on Saturday, the reaction will be very, very interesting indeed. I'm literally watching Tanya Watson connect with the water once again.
Here we go. She connected with the water.
Right on cue. Will O'Callaghan is here to take it away. Good morning to you, Will.
Morning, lads. How are you getting on? Yeah, Tanya Watson in her 4th dive currently. Well positioned after 3, 14th overall in the 10-metre platform. Crucially, the top 18 will progress to the semi-finals. So we'll know in about 35 minutes time or so whether the teenager on her Olympic debut is going to be making it through to a semi. We could get Olympic medals later for Ireland in the show jumping. Bertram Allen, Cian O'Connor and Dara Kenny will all go in the individual final from 11 a.m. Irish time. They qualified yesterday without incurring a fault between them. Kenny particularly is going to benefit from being among the last of the riders because of his positioning. He was 2nd overall yesterday, one of the quickest times going through, no faults incurred, so he's very well placed. You've got Olympic medal experience in Cian O'Connor from 2012, where he was a bronze medalist at the London Games. Bertram Allen has been a rising star in the last few years, so hopes are high that at least one medal can be won by Team Ireland. They still have the team event to come later this week too. Leona Maguire is 5 shots off the lead after the opening day's play in the women's golf at the Olympics. She's opened with a level par round of 71 in Tokyo, while Stephanie Meadow will be 1 over into day 2. Meadow rescued her round somewhat with 2 birdies on her last 3 holes. Well, it was a bit of a mixed day for Leona Maguire, who goes in really good form from the last few weeks. 3 birdies, 3 bogeys. Sweden's Madeleine Sagström is the player to catch. She's got a 1-shot advantage over the field in the gold medal position at 5 under par. We've got the 200 metres final coming up in about an hour's time in Tokyo, but earlier today, Sydney McLaughlin of the USA smashed her own world record to take gold in the women's 400 metres hurdles. The 21-year-old clocked 51.46 as she shaved almost half a second off the old mark in reeling in the defending champion Dalia Mohammed. Great Britain's reign as the women's hockey champions has come to a pretty crushing end. They were beaten 5-1 by the world champions, the Netherlands, in the semi-finals this morning. Both those teams were in Ireland's Pool A at the Games, and both of them beat the Irish team along the way. And Simone Biles says that she'll forever cherish her unique Olympic experience after taking over her overall haul at the Games to 7 across 2 different championships. The 4-time Olympic champion won bronze in the beam yesterday to add to the silver which she won in the team event. Biles had pulled out of the all-around, the vault, the floor and the uneven bars finals in order to protect her mental health, lads.
Yeah, so that's the latest from the Tokyo Games. Were you up early this morning, Will, catching up on everything, or was this the morning where you decided I can get a bit of a lie in?
Treated myself slightly today, lads, because I knew that the golf was only going to be finishing around the time I was due up at 5 a.m. So there was no 2 a.m. alarm or 3 alarm today. I'm very hopeful about the show jumpers after 11 o'clock. Derek Henny said at the weekend, in very confident mood, but insisted he wasn't being cocky when he said he'd be disappointed if he goes home without 2 medals. He expects to win both in the individual and in the team event. He's based out in Florida. He's been really well in the 5-star events coming up to the Games, so he's got plenty of form. And he thinks alongside Bertram Allen and Keane O'Connor, they've got a really good chance of going well in the team event too. Like the fact that he was second overall yesterday, I think it was 81 seconds that he completed his round in. He was one of the first out, gets the benefit of the draw of going out as one of the last, so he'll know exactly what he has to do when he goes into the arena. And I guess we're all hopeful that both Allen and O'Connor can give it a good run as well. After I chat to you guys, it's basically back to focus on the athletics again, and we've got some of the major finals coming up. It's going to be hard to beat both the men's and women's 400 metres hurdles over the last couple of days, where the world records have been absolutely smashed. But if we get any kind of excitement like that in the 200 metres, it'll be a good watch in about an hour's time. And like you guys, just before I came on, I had the diving on. You had the benefit of actually seeing the latest dive that we had from Tanya Watson. I had to flick it off just before I flicked the camera on to talk to you guys. So it's compelling watching, though. I actually really enjoyed the diving too.
Yeah.
Diving is without question one of the great Olympic sports, and perfect for that expertise that you can gain in the space of probably half an hour to go from knowing nothing, but suddenly everything that you've learned 4 years ago, 8 years ago comes flooding back. And again, you know, you can suddenly watch the splash and think, oh, they've blown it, which is just glorious.
Speak for
It's
yourself.
one of those as well, Nathan, where like you're pretty much assured in your mind that you know the dive is absolutely perfect, and they're running through it saying, oh, it's a twisting 2.5 somersault. They hit the water, you go, it's pretty much perfect. And then you see they get a terrible score and you go, right, my half an hour knowledge isn't too perfect on this. And we had the rock climbing yesterday as well, lads, getting underway. And it's just gladiators in Olympic form trying to run up and hit the buzzer first. And that was an absolutely incredible watch yesterday afternoon.
I missed that. Actually, I must catch up on it.
Get on the Olympic YouTube and have a look back. It's incredible.
The golf is going to be good over the next few days because we still have quite a few medal hopes. Obviously, you're touching on the equestrian there and whether Kelly Harrington can go on and win a gold. But like Eoin Maguire is still right in it. Like conditions, I was looking at some of it this morning. I think this is the hottest day so far in Japan. It's absolutely sweltering up above 35. Some of the caddies were being taken off the course mid-round because the heat was so intense. So really, really difficult conditions in the golf so far. You might have even seen in the men's golf during the playoff that CT Pan, who took the bronze, started carrying some of the clubs for his caddy because it was so hot. So the conditions are going to be pretty tough, but Eoin Maguire's got a really good chance of nicking something there over the next 3 days.
Yeah, not a bad first round for the Irish on the golf course this week as well. Right, at 12 minutes past 9, Will, you were going to hang around because next we've got Deal or No Deal.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
OTB Sports is the place to follow all the live and uninterrupted Lions coverage this summer. Lions legends Brian O'Driscoll and Alan Quinlan will be our commentators for the 3 huge tests against South Africa. We'll have plenty of expert analysis and input too from the likes of Devin Toner, Niamh Briggs, Sean Cronin and Jack Carty. That's the Lions tour against the world champion South Africa. All the big match build-up, match commentary and analysis live on the OTB Sports app.
Sean, what's that thing going round the garden?
That is our new Husqvarna Automower.
Automower?
Yeah, it's a robotic lawnmower from Husqvarna. Cuts the grass automatically, has GPS tracking and an app. Even works in the rain. I just thought, why spend time cutting grass when I could spend it with the family?
Great! You can put the dinner on, so...
No can do, love. Have to paint the man cave.
Husqvarna Automower. Never mow again. Learn more at husqvarna.ie.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
What about your own personal position? Every day the newspapers are saying he's worth £5 million. Real Madrid want to sign him. Blackburn want to sign him. Liverpool want to sign him. What is the position?
Well, the position's simple. I'm on a contract for another season and a half. And I've discussed a new contract at Forest, and if I get the right deal, I'm prepared to stay, because to me this is the best club in England. And I have a lot to learn, and I don't think I can learn in any better place than on a playing club.
It is time for Deal or No Deal here on OTB AM, which is brought to you by Gillette. Good morning, start with Gillette. Put your best face forward with their new and improved razors. Our experts today are Nathan Murphy and Will O'Callaghan. And as Harry Kane continues to sit out Spurs training, the latest reports suggest that Manchester City are confident that they can sign the English striker for £130 million, not the £160 million that Tottenham Hotspur want for him. The Guardian report that he's expected back at the club in the coming days following a period of self-isolating after a trip to the Bahamas. If you were a member of Tottenham Hotspur's top brass, what would your strategy be to deal with the situation, Nathan?
Oh, if you're Daniel Levy, you're thinking all your Christmases have come at once. This is the perfect scenario for him. Suddenly, there's the first inkling that Harry Kane could be the bad guy in all of this. So Daniel Levy is well used to being in that position, that he's a man who cannot match the ambition of the Tottenham players, the Tottenham supporters. The club's flakiness is largely down to him and his reluctance to properly invest in the club and support managers the way he should. Whereas now he knows, worst case scenario, Harry Kane stays at the club and scores 20 Premier League goals this season and puts them in the fight for top four. Worst case scenario, he can just hold out and get maybe that 160 million, which goes a long way to paying off that enormous debt that they have on the stadium. Leave it so long, there's not much time for you to properly reinvest in a replacement. You probably sign Danny Ings 5 minutes before deadline day for 20 million from Southampton and hope he gets you 15 goals and somehow appeases the Spurs supporters. But I think this has swung more in Tottenham's favour over the last 48 hours. And Miguel Delaney was interested last night, and off the ball saying there's a sense from within Tottenham that Kane has bottled it. The fact that he's going back to training, that this bizarre sense from Kane's camp yesterday that he couldn't understand what all the fuss was about. I didn't turn up for training. I told my England teammates I wasn't going to turn up for training. I didn't do it. How is this front page, back page news? So I think actually from a Tottenham point of view, considering we've known for months that he wants to go, this has worked out quite well for them over the last couple of days.
Will, how would Kane fit into Pep's City side?
Really well. I mean, he's pretty much the perfect signing that they could make, given that he's got proven Premier League pedigree, given the fact that he'll play in the number 9 position, but is happy enough to drift around a little bit and to allow players like the attacking midfielders that Manchester City have to go ahead of him if required too. Like, he would be the perfect focal point for that Manchester City attack. I can't think of a better player in Europe currently who would be a like-for-like replacement for Sergio Aguero and an upgrade on Sergio Aguero too if they could bring him in. That's why I think if you're Manchester City's board currently, you're probably just, if you can get him for 130, as the Athletic seem to be claiming over the last 24 hours, add 30 million to the bid. I thought it was interesting that they went in with 100 million for Grealish, which surely would have been a rubbing the hands moment for Daniel Levy too. When you think they're willing to go to that level for Jack Grealish from Aston Villa, we hold all the cards here because Harry Kane signed that 6-year contract and is under contract at White Hart Lane until 2025. So therefore, they've got no great need to sell in terms of his contract running down. And also, they know that realistically, Manchester City, maybe Manchester United, are the only clubs in Europe who can currently afford him. So it's a case of, if City aren't willing to pay for it, maybe Manchester United will, but they know the City are going to have to cough up that money. And City have kind of backed themselves into a little bit of position here because they're having to work with Daniel Levy a couple of weeks out from the start of the new Premier League season, where they don't really have a recognised number 9 unless they want to play Gabriel Jesus into that position. But generally, they've been reluctant enough to do so over the last season. And, Jesus' injuries haven't helped the situation either. So City desperately need a focal point striker at this point. Tottenham know that there's a desperation from City to try and sign one, and therefore they're going to sit back and make sure that they get close to that 160 million. Like, Daniel Levy's been here before with Bale, with Berbatov. He will happily wait until the closing moments of the transfer window. But it would seem that maybe their position is softening in terms of selling him when you consider the business that Spurs have been doing with signing players kind of slowly but surely. It almost reminds me of the Gareth Bale summer, when they went and spent quite a bit of the Gareth Bale windfall before the transfer was actually sanctioned. And that would give, I think, City a little bit of hope, where you see Spurs doing business at 40 million, bringing a player or two in now. Maybe it's going to be a case their position will soften. But do you know how you think about it, Nathan? I think Harry Kane's absolutely perfect for City's system.
This is the most important transfer of the summer. Like, it's basically Manchester City hitting cheat mode if they sign both Jack Grealish and Harry Kane. They will win the league. They have to win the league. It would be the greatest failure of Pep Guardiola's management career if they sign Harry Kane and Jack Grealish and Manchester City don't win the league. Remember, there were matches at the end of last season where City had a bench that was worth around 350, 400 million. And then you're going to add in two of the best players in the Premier League to that. Kane is perfect. He is, as you say, a match of Aguero at his peak. He will be playing under a different level of pressure. I know his Premier League record is insane and may well go on to be the greatest Premier League and all-time Premier League leading scorer. But at Manchester City, he'll have a different pressure. He'll have to do it in the biggest Champions League game. The expectation would be not just that they win the Premier League, that they win the Champions League as well. And I think if Kane signs for Manchester City, nobody can stop them this season, regardless of Manchester United, regardless of Chelsea, if they sign Lukaku, regardless if Liverpool go in and invest big. You look at the talent that was already there and you add in Grealish and Kane, this has to be an unstoppable force. But against that, if they don't sign Kane, I think the others will feel they have a real opportunity because like Gabriel Jesus is just not up to it. Last season, Gundogan was their top scorer with 13 Premier League goals. I don't think that's sustainable for another season. So like Kane is make or break in the title race.
You mentioned Lukaku there. He could be set for a sensational return to the Premier League. The Metro report that Inter Milan are willing to sell him to Chelsea for a £100 million fee to balance their books. The Sun report that he feels he has unfinished business at the London side. How poorly does his post-Manchester United hot streak reflect, I should say, on the club and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer for failing to keep him at Old Trafford is what it says here, Nathan?
I think that's very harsh on Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, isn't it? Lukaku never worked at Manchester United. Their style of play never worked at Manchester United. They never got him released in behind. If he was going to a Manchester United right now, you would think actually he could be a perfect fit for United. But like so many games I remember commenting on where he was such a peripheral figure, like the matches against Liverpool where I don't even think Van Dijk put a tackle in him at any stage. He had just such control and Lukaku's positioning was totally off and physically, bizarrely, just couldn't seem to match him. But I don't think you can put all that on Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. I think the seeds had probably been well sown at that stage by Jose Mourinho and what had gone wrong at Manchester United. But you can understand completely why Chelsea would want him, and it seems Inter Milan, like a lot of clubs around Europe, need the cash, and there's no faith in Timo Werner. Like the comments after their friendly against Arsenal at the weekend from Thomas Tuchel certainly wouldn't have done Timo Werner's confidence any good at all. That basically, we just got to hope that it starts happening for him. And he's very likable. Timo Werner is full of energy. Will try his best, but much like Alvaro Morata, you sort of look at him and think 4 chances for 1. That's not Romelu Lukaku. Romelu Lukaku comes in, he's probably going to get you 20 Premier League goals this season.
Jose is to blame for Lukaku at United, not Solskjaer, by the way. That's what I think is harsh about it. I think there were still inklings of Lukaku at Manchester United that he could break out under a bit of a better manager or under a better game plan. And I think you're right that as things have slowly got better over the course of the last season, you're like, it could work, a bit of a reunion. But
we should remember as well, with Lukaku.
Jose had him at Chelsea too.
His first season at Manchester United, Lukaku got 16 Premier League goals. Right now, Manchester United would be crying out for that.
Yeah. It was and I think it was just kind of things started to get worse, and there was like maybe who would have thought it? The manager who manages to suck confidence out of his players did the exact same thing with Romelu Lukaku when there was the first sign of weakness maybe in his confidence. Jose just exacerbated that. That's certainly how I recall it. Maybe I'm misremembering, but that's certainly how it seemed to me. Just thought this is a really good piece of business for Chelsea if it does happen, Will, right?
Yeah, look, 24 goals in Serie A last season. He was the best player in Serie A too. He's added a lot to his game under Antonio Conte. He upped his work rate last season. Now you can see why Conte has left. When you see what's happening at Inter Milan currently, where Hakimi left for big money to PSG as they tried to clear down the financial issues that they have, and now it would appear that one of two is going to leave. It's either going to be Romelu Lukaku or Lautaro Martinez. One of the two will be leaving in this window. And Inter seem determined, a little bit like Spurs, that 100 million is the price that they want. This initial bid from Chelsea, which was rejected according to Sky in Italy, Chelsea were valuing it at around 100 million pounds when they considered it was 85 cash up front, plus Marcus Alonso, who Inter have been kind of long-term admirers of the left wing back, who I'm sure Chelsea would be happy enough to get off their books as part of this deal. They reckon that it's coming pretty close to being able to get an agreement. I think if you're Inter and you get to keep the slightly younger player in Martinez around the club, it probably doesn't look terrible business for Inter either. Yeah. But they are losing, obviously, the focal point of their attack from last season. For Chelsea, as Nathan said, it's a guaranteed 20 Premier League goals for next season. And also for Timo Werner, crucially, it might mean that he can move out to his preferred position on the left again if they've got a centre forward who they can play up front. And maybe that can just get Timo Werner back into form. If Chelsea sign Romelu Lukaku, the amount of attacking options they have is scary, but it's just a case of trying to find a way for them to click, because I think it's fair to say last season that it didn't happen entirely either for Kai Havertz or for Hakim Ziyech. And crucially, they want to try and get them into, a working forward line with Christian Pulisic also there as an option. They have an embarrassment of riches, but maybe not quite the blend just yet. Can Lukaku be the final piece of the jigsaw that might work?
Havertz is under pressure to have a breakout season because literally everybody has said, watch out for Kai Havertz next season. He's going to absolutely break out. So, fresh reports suggesting that there is no substance to story suggesting that Liverpool are interested in Inter and Italy's Nicolo Barella and ready to pay €70 million for him. The editor of an Italian football news site has told the Blood Red Liverpool fan channel that this story has been fanned by the footballer's agent while negotiating new terms with the Italian champions. Nathan, who should Liverpool be signing in this window, and are they ready to compete for the title again?
Competing for the title, I think, again, depends on if Manchester City sign Harry Kane. I think it's going to be almost impossible for them to compete for the title. I think they're going to be a hell of a lot more consistent and better than they were last season. But you look at the names they've been linked with, and they've been linked with dozens of names, and they're clearly being used by agents across Europe to throw players' names out there in the hope of getting them a new contract. Like, they're not, it seems, competing at that very top level. Over the new year, there was speculation that they were in for Kylian Mbappe potentially. Like, that has gone very quiet. And at that stage, I thought, wow, if Liverpool are back in the market for a player of that caliber, you would expect them to be contending and probably winning the Premier League. But it seems, with the way they're going about the business, again, they're just going to be reliant on the genius and the brilliance and the passion of Jurgen Klopp to bring the best out of everybody. It looks as though they're looking at Thiago and Diogo Jota almost as their two new signings right now, unless they have plans going on in the background. But that Jota get a full season out of them, Thiago get a full season out of them. But it does feel as though they're light in midfield in particular. I know if everyone was fit, you're looking going, well, 4-3 doesn't fit last season with Fabinho, Henderson, Thiago and Wijnaldum. But suddenly you find yourself in a position with who is the backup if one of those players isn't fit. Are they going to go with Naby Keita and
Curtis Jones.
Trust them to play Curtis Jones and trust them to play 25 games? Like, maybe they have seen enough in Curtis Jones, but when you look at the investment that everybody else is making, like, one injury suddenly means Curtis Jones is having to start pretty much every single match. And again, one transfer maybe changes that, but it does feel as though, I thought that FSG would respond like a lot of the owners and feel under pressure to make a massive investment. But when you're looking at Barella or Insigne or Adama Traore, they're not definite game changers, not definite starters. But it does come down to a lot of the same questions are there. Remember, we ended last season wondering about Mane and Salah. Do Mane and Salah get on? Is there an issue there? Like, that hasn't been fixed. They're going to still start every single game, you feel, for Liverpool next season. So listen, unless they've always gone about their business quietly, I do think they need one or two more players just to keep some pressure on as reinforcements, because you'd expect that somebody like Minamino is going to end up going alone. So right now, do I see them as contenders? If City sign Kane, I don't. But if City don't sign Kane, I think, they'll definitely still have a chance.
Couple of Irish ones to go through really quickly before we wrap. James McCarthy is a Celtic player. If he can stay fit, how much game time will he see in Scotland, and what impact can a fit McCarthy have in Stephen Kenny's Ireland side? Nathan, you go first here.
Stephen Kenny loves James McCarthy, started him over in the playoff in Slovakia, would love him, I think, to be that number 6 and the man who is starting moves and sort of opens everything up. We just haven't seen that James McCarthy being fit enough for long enough for Ireland in particular. He's played a lot more game time, thankfully, at club level over the last couple of years. We saw what Shane Duffy did at Celtic, which unfortunately wasn't very much, and the love he had for Celtic and the reasons he went there. James McCarthy, maybe not quite as an emotional figure as Shane Duffy, but again, going there as a Celtic supporter on a 4-year contract, which seems like absolute insanity considering his injury record. Listen, if he can play every single game and he wants to play for Ireland, he'll more than likely be in and around that Ireland team. But I'm at this stage, unfortunately, probably past getting overly excited.
And Will, for you, according to the Sun, Blackburn are keen to sign Southampton and Ireland's Michael Obafemi, and the Saints are valuing him at £6 million. Would a move to the Championship be good for him?
Yeah, definitely. He needs to be playing. That's the crucial thing. I mean, Obafemi's been lucky with injuries over the last couple of seasons. Not as unlucky as the aforementioned James McCarthy, who's had 1 season in 5 where he's played more than 20 games. But, for Obafemi, he needs to get out, play football, get back scoring goals again. We see flashes from him over the last couple of years, particularly in bigger games where Southampton are playing on the counter-attack, that Obafemi's pace can be really, really threatening, even against the very best opposition. I think Blackburn would be a good move. They've got a few other Irish players there. Hopefully he can play himself back into contention, because we need as many Irish forwards, particularly of this young generation, back playing and actually scoring, to give Stephen Kenny a few choices. I personally think, just on the McCarthy side, it's mental to think that Celtic will be paying him when he's 35, when the last 5 seasons would indicate that really he can't stay fit for longer than a few months. Great move from McCarthy, fantastic to get a 4-year contract, but if I'm a Celtic fan, I can't believe that they've handed that type of contract out, or given £1 million of the Queen's pounds for Joe Hart, who in theory is not a goalkeeper that suits their profile whatsoever.
No, that's for sure. Will O'Callaghan, Nathan Murphy, great stuff. That is today's Deal or No Deal.
I signed for them after the Euros, and after my first day's training, I was driving home. I was actually thinking, regretting it. What have I done? Like I walked into a circus. It's amazing, isn't it?
OTB AM is brought to you by Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette. Put your best face forward with their new and improved razors. Coming up on OTB Sports Radio today, we have an OTB Gold interview with Catherine Switzer at 1 o'clock. Cork's Mount Rushmore from 3 o'clock. And then a retro panel on how to coach kids from 4 o'clock. The Olympic show with Thanks to Indeed is live from 5 o'clock as ever. And then from 6 o'clock is OTB Gold with Dennis Ogie-Moran. You can subscribe to the OTB AM podcast and our YouTube channel to get all our best stuff first. And we'll be back at 7:30 tomorrow, right after Kelly Harrington's Olympic semi-final. We will leave you this morning with some GAA. Johnny Doyle and Billy Joe Padden joined Joe last night.
The football at the weekend was interesting, and we should have 2 very good All-Ireland football senior semi-finals. The dates, if you missed them, Saturday evening, 6 o'clock, should be a great occasion. We'll have about 25,000 at these 2 matches, by the way. So this is Saturday, 14th of August, Saturday week, 6 o'clock throw-in. Mayo against Dublin, and then the next day, Sunday, 3:30, Kerry against Tyrone. That's after Dublin beat Kildare in the Leinster final on Sunday. 20 points to Kildare's 1-9, and then on Saturday Tyrone beat Monaghan by a single point, 16 points to 15 in the end. To discuss, very happy to say, we have Billy Joe Padden with us, and we have Johnny Doyle as well. You're there, Johnny?
Yeah, Joe, how are you?
Very well. Billy Joe, good to have you on.
Thanks, Joe.
So Johnny, let's start with Dublin Kildare then. Dublin 20 points, Kildare 1-9. Kildare will have a few regrets in this game, I would put it to you, Johnny. Wasteful too often in front of goal. In the first half, they had 3 wides and they dropped about 5 short, not even all of them into Evan Comerford's hands. Some of them were quite bad kicks, you'd have to say. And then second half, it didn't improve massively. They left 5 short and they had 4 wide. So you mix all that together, that's 17 efforts on goal. No team's going to make them all, but definitely Kildare would feel, do you know what, 1-9, we were better than 1-9.
Yeah, we were better than 1-9 in the greater scheme of things, Joe. But, while we analyse the game and we talk about how much the game has changed, and it's always changing, and the ebb and flow of the game, the basics of the game stay the same. It's about score. And when you go to a final and kick 17 wide, or you have 17 shots to go and hit the target, you're going to be going home talking about what if. And that's the reality. That's the cold reality. And while you might get away earlier in the championship when you come up against arguably the greatest team that ever played the game, albeit that personnel has changed over the last decade when they've won all these All-Irelands. The vast nucleus of that team are laden down with All-Ireland titles, so you're going to be punished, and punished we were. So I suppose when you analyse it, and you look and you said before the game, you know, you keep Conor Callan to a point. You know, Kilkenny would be taken off. Conor Callan was taken off. Brian Fenton, you know, wasn't at his usual best. You'd be thinking, you know, we won't be too far away. And yes, you know, in layman's terms, we go back with beaten by 8 points. It's bordering towards getting a bit of a trouncing.
Yeah, no, it was very comfortable in the end, second half, when Dublin sorted themselves out of touch and started taking more scores. Like Daniel Flynn's brilliant. We'll come on to him in a second, but also Kildare are very reliant on him. Like, Kildare had 5 scores, Dublin had 9 scores. If you take away Daniel Flynn's contribution, Kildare had 5 points from play, you know. Now, it's great to see Flynn back, obviously, but that's a frailty with this team. And to be honest with you, Johnny, and you were one of the notable exceptions. I don't know if you believe in like a county's DNA or not, but it has been an Achilles heel of Kildare, even going back to Miko's time, you know, like loads of possession and maybe not making that possession count enough at times.
Well, certainly a label that we've had to live with over the last 20 years anyway, or maybe more. And until maybe Miko's second coming, I suppose, when we start to get a bit of success. I'd argue maybe a little bit, I think we bridged that gap a little bit in Kieran's era.
Yeah.
When, you know, you had the likes of James Kavanagh and Alan Smith, Mikey Conway, Eamon O'Callaghan, Ron Sweeney, all, you know, and any day would kick, you know, would be good scoring forward. But certainly it is a problem, there's no doubt about it. You know, I think probably the way we play the game is an issue. When we look at, you know, without being critical of anybody, you know, lads go out to give their best, and they did give a good account of them, but it's at a level now, you know, where you have to be very sure when you're shooting under pressure. And the way we play the game, Joe, and the way this team has played it, you know, and even under Cian O'Neill's tender, there's a lot of emphasis on not giving the ball away. And time again, I felt on Sunday, you know, Ben McCormick broke the line, ran hard at them, but again, you know, after exhausting himself, he shoots under pressure, nobody coming off the shoulder. On the flip side of that, you go down the other side, and when Dublin did that, the 2 or 3 options to slip a ball, or, you know, someone comes at an angle run, Dean Rock or Paddy Small, you know, just cut inside, ball is popped to them, and it's gone for a simple score. So we don't have pace in numbers, and that causes problems. You know, like we've seen lots of, these boys are well capable of kicking scores. Like Jimmy Hyland's as good as finisher that's in the game. You know, left and right foot, it doesn't matter to him. There's not too many lads that can kick frees off both feet as comfortable as Jimmy can. But yet we didn't get him on the ball, and for whatever reason, we didn't get enough ball into Daniel Flynn in that second half when he was having a very good game. And I thought, you know, I can be critical of Daniel at times. I think, you know, you need to give us more, Daniel. You know, sometimes there's a bit of magic, but then, you know, for whatever reason, we don't see it enough in the game. I thought he was really good on Sunday. Everything he did, you know, worked hard when he didn't have the ball. You know, most times he made the ball count, and that goal was top notch. But certainly, I think we have to find another way that we run in when we do attack. We have options coming off the shoulder, and we're not leaving lads in isolation. That's what we tended to do a good bit on Sunday. And you know, at this level, Joe, you cannot afford to miss those opportunities.
Yeah.
You get it. Every team's going to miss, you know, a couple of scores, but Kildare cannot afford. You know, even the goal when Daniel got the goal, you know, really give the whole place. You say, okay, we next have to press the next kick out, and Evan Comfort got a handy kick out, moved it up the field, didn't put pressure on the Dublin defence, and it's over the bar the far end. Very simple. So it was nearly, you know, when we needed to, you know, batter the door after doing, you know, getting a good goal, we needed to put pressure that we forced them to go at least 50-50. We didn't do that. So there's a lot in it, but certainly it's a thing. You're not going to win championship games scoring 1-9. That is a fact.
No. Billy Joe, there's a lot in what Johnny says there. Can I throw 2 of the points to you to get your thoughts on it? So he mentioned Kildare surrendering the kickouts, and you know, like when Flynn dispossesses McCarthy off a kick-out and scores the goal, it gives you a glimpse of what can be done when you win turnover ball high off the pitch. But effectively, Kildare gave Dublin all the kickouts. The logic, the rights and wrongs of that, I'd be curious for your thoughts on. And then secondly, Johnny also mentioned a lot of possession around the middle third, going very laterally, and it was hard to know on TV, was Daniel Flynn like being treble marked or whatever, but there was you just had this sense you'd love to have seen where he was at a shot, because the more they could get the ball to him, the better, obviously. So those 2 aspects of the Kildare performance, I'd be interested for your thoughts on.
Very important. Both I suppose, sections of any game are important. But I suppose, firstly, in terms of the kickouts, and my thoughts on it are, if you can, and this is any team, not just the game we witnessed at the weekend, if you concede all the kickouts to the other team, well, you better hope that you're having all the possession and it's their goalkeeper that's kicking the ball out, that some way or other you manage to get that ball back. And against Dublin, of course, that's not likely. As well, then you better hope that you win all your kickouts, because if you're going to have a chance of beating Dublin, I believe that you have to break at least even when you combine your own kickouts and their kickouts. If they're winning 60 of the combined total of their own kickouts, 60% of the combined total of their own kickouts, and then taking 25-30% of yours minimum, well, then they're winning more possession. How are you going to beat, as Johnny says, probably the greatest team that has ever played the game? So you have to take more risks. You have to push players higher up the field. I think the way Kildare were set up, and I can totally understand this, they wanted to defend deep, they wanted to just frustrate Dublin, and they did that for the most part. And that's probably what kept them in the game early in that first half. But it just meant that all those forwards, Hyland, Flynn, were totally isolated in a defensive point of view, that they couldn't get enough support up behind them to really put pressure on Comfort. And then when they dropped all back, and you mentioned it there about the middle third, they had so many bodies back, but they just were not able to transition the ball out of that area quickly enough. Not enough runners off the shoulder. And then very often, Flynn got the ball isolated. Hyland got the ball isolated in the corner, too far away, and he is a good finisher. Even McCormick, when he got the ball, he was isolated and taking bad shots. And as Johnny said, dropping in the keeper's hands and all that is totally unacceptable. So you just have to, your game plan has to evolve to be able to push players higher up the field. You can't pressure Dublin on every kick out, but there are situations in the game following, like there's a couple of times, I think following a water break, they mightn't have even pressed the kick out appropriately, and that's not acceptable in my opinion. So you have to, there are situations where you have to put the pressure on, because you just can't hand Dublin over 60-70% of restart possession, because any good team should find themselves in a winning platform off that. But I think the other thing then that was noticeable to me was that even during that good defensive work in the first half, first 20-25 minutes, when they were able to frustrate Dublin a little bit, they just didn't have that speed to break out of the middle third with 2, 3, 4 runners, didn't have that confidence that a pod of 3 or 4 would go and really try and make something happen. And then inevitably the Kildare forwards are too far away from goal. I did feel as well in the first half that Daniel Flynn, he's such a dynamic athlete, and he was so isolated. No one could have given out to him at certain times there if he just literally tried to take his man on. And if he got dispossessed, so be it. He didn't have a whole lot of support. But I think it would have been worth trying, because they probably needed those goals in that first half to get ahead, because once you go into Dublin, 4 or 5 points down at half time, the game's effectively over.
Yeah. And like, if he has support, he can pick out a pass, as we've even seen over the last couple of games as well. Like, his foot passing is brilliant. Johnny, you'd be watching Kildare more than Billy Joe and I suspect. Would Kildare always surrender the kickouts, or was this just a slightly fearful approach to Dublin?
I wouldn't say they always do, Joe. I think it might have been, to be set up well in defence. Obviously, we know, what Dublin are capable of doing, and I know, especially the last day against Westmeath, a few times, Westmeath were just ran at us and caused us serious problems. And with team selection, Alex Byrne was sacrificed, who I felt had a really good championship up to the weekend. He was sacrificed, and Sheahan came into that role, and Shea plays all his football in defence, so we were going to play with that extra defender. And
that's a fair point, actually, because even on the TV before the game, they just showed various clips of Westmeath running at Kildare and like really looking like a goal was on. So in fairness, I guess it's very easy for us to say, would you not press up in the kickouts and have a go? But if you're leaving your defence open and Westmeath caused them a lot of trouble, you can sort of see how Jock O'Connor thinks, well, I don't want to concede 2 or 3 goals here in the first half.
I would agree with that. We had to stay in the game, and I thought we were a little bit unlucky to go in at half time 4 points down. I think it was 4 points, maybe 5 points down. I thought we'd done enough, albeit we dropped a few short in that first half, but I felt we should have been closer at half time. And there would have been a lot of people over the last couple of days being pretty glad they didn't have a go. And at the time, to be honest with you, I thought maybe they didn't have a go. But then when you look at the substitutes that came in, and like some of the Kildare substitutes that came in, like Alex Byrne, who plays in the half forward, and Niall Kelly, who's an out-and-out forward, Derek Cowan, Brian McLaughlin, Sheahan O'Sullivan, all out-and-out scoring forwards. But it's in at the moment with this team, and it comes, when you're under pressure, and Billy Joe will tell you, when you're under pressure at any level, at any football, you revert to type. You revert to doing what you've been doing all the time. And what we do a lot in Kildare, we run the ball through the hands. We don't look to kick. And Dublin had us, to play Johnny Cooper in front of Daniel Flynn, who a lesser behind Jimmy Hyland. And when you're coming out with the half back line, and you're looking to kick, and you're seeing Johnny Cooper standing in front, Daniel Flynn trying to sprint to the corner, it has to be a really, really good kick. So what do? We look to keep the ball. And that's a lot of what we did, where we needed some outlet on that half forward line that sat in front of maybe Johnny Cooper, that had plenty of legs to go left and right, to be an outlet for that ball. Because when that ball wasn't on inside and we too much space, we would tend to go lateral. And even when we turned them over, we went safe. We let the Dublin get back behind the ball. And we just kept the ball around the middle. So that's, and maybe I'm going away from your question.
No. That's sorry. You've kind of summed up the game there perfectly. Like you've summed up Kildare's predicament perfectly there.
Yeah, and I think that I think, in fairness to the management team, I think they would have got it right up to a certain point, but it's just that we have to, and I don't know whether it is, and we have to get used to supporting the ball at pace, and whether that's a conditioning side of our game, but so many times runners were left isolated, and when they did, they turned and were happy to kick the ball. Now you could look at Dublin and say the same. They'd worked it so far, but they were patient, and then someone took it on the burst, broke that inside the game line, and they got easy scores.
Yeah.
And Kildare weren't capable of doing it.
Yeah, I guess, well, Jack O'Connor said, season of progress and back up to Division 1. So we'll see what Kildare can muster up next year. So Dublin, Billy Joe, the interesting stat here. I mean, it's hard to judge Dublin until they get to a final, effectively, or until they're really pushed. So you're judging them against inferior opposition generally through the early stages of the championship. But in so much as we can judge them on that basis, their combined winning margin, if you take the Kildare game, the Meath game before that, and Wexford before that, 22 points. You add up the three winning margins. Whereas you take Meath last year, they beat Meath by 17 points alone last year. Like they were, destroying teams with more ease last year. This winning margin in the Leinster final at the weekend, that's their lowest in a provincial decider going back 8 years. So again, all these little markers, and it's how much you read into them, I suppose, but all these markers suggest they're not as far ahead as they were for sure. And the thing that jumped out from that first half is that we mentioned Kildare's accuracy. Of Dublin's 18 efforts in the first half, they scored with 9 of them. So, 50% strike rate for Dublin is almost unheard of. Now, in fairness, second half, they went 11 of 12, and that's where they really pulled away. But there's still something not quite right here, I would put it to you, by their standards.
Yes, the Leinster Championship they haven't been as dominant as they have been basically for the last 10 years in every game, and the points differential there tells that story. I suppose when you look at it and you have to analyse, well, why is that happening? And many people are pointing to the players that they're missing, and just maybe even I don't know, I don't want to say they're getting stale or it's hard to keep continuing to go to a high level, but there's no doubt that missing a Cluxton in particular this year at short notice impacts on the culture of the group, the mentality of the group, even though Comerford looks a very fine keeper. There's no doubt about that. But at the same time, we really don't know what their training plan has been. It's a unique season for us in that it's a knockout championship in summer. Even last season was different, as well. It was a knockout championship in winter, where fellas had club championships under their belt. So maybe they use the Leinster Championship as a really heavy training load. I have no evidence to back this up.
Sure.
And maybe they're only planning to peak for the month of August. And if you look at the second half, and you rightly pointed out that the statistics were markedly improved, and then you see somebody like Eoin Merchant come on, and he's showing the pace that he can bring to a game, and you get a glimpse of that. And when you add those sort of players to it, and the fact that it's hard to believe that Fenton or O'Callaghan, who are big game players, who really have risen their level against Mayo in the past and against big in All-Ireland finals, would you bet against them doing it again? No, I wouldn't. So I think that you have to be really cautious if you're clinging on to something that Dublin have fallen way back. Of course, losing some of the players that they've lost will impact the strength of their squad, but they're still a very, very serious outfit, still scores 20 points. And still, even to maybe get back to the point in the first half about Kildare having all this possession, they're very, very hard to counterattack against. They're still a very well defensively organised side. Kildare do not look like scoring a goal. And even in the All-Ireland final last year against Mayo, really well set up defensively in the second half, like they always seem to be. So they're a huge challenge, and I suppose their demise may be exaggerated.
Yeah, and like maybe there's a degree of wishful thinking in the rest of the country, Johnny, that they'll come back a touch and we get something a bit more competitive. So like I've reeled off all the stats there. You'd have forget about the stats, you'd have just a feel for where they are as players and as a team. What are you seeing from them, say, on Sunday and even the last couple of games?
Yeah, look, I suppose we're judging Dublin like we'll never judge another team.
Yeah.
In the fact that they're such high standards. They're at times over the last 10 years they're like a machine. They just never they never went off script at all, and that probably came down to with the sound bites you'd hear a little bit talking to former players and stuff. Probably came down to Jim Gavin too, in his the way he dealt with players. I don't think Jim Gavin would come out on that after a Leinster semi-final and say, I don't know what the story is with one of my players. Like, that would have alarm bells ringing. Now, maybe Desi knows exactly where Cluxton is, and Cluxton knows exactly where he is. I don't know, but, from the outside looking in, I also, you see Dean Rock going off, rightly or wrongly.
He didn't look thrilled.
Didn't look happy.
He didn't look thrilled, did he?
No, he didn't look thrilled, and expressed that, in his body language. Would that happen under Jim Gavin? I get the impression it wouldn't. So, while all this is going on and maybe everybody talking them down a little bit, listen, I'm with Billy. I think they're still a fantastic team. To beat Kildare, and we're talking about maybe they're not at the level they were, but still won by 10 points with probably, Brian Fenton and Conor Callan having a below par game. I would give huge credit to Luke Flynn and to Mick O'Grady on that. I think they went about their business very, very well, and they would have been earmarked to nullify them, which is easier said than done. There's a lot of good players would have been sent out to do that job and couldn't do it. But certainly, I just get the impression that there's the culture is not as it was, and I know culture is a word that's thrown around, bandied around an awful lot these days. But you just feel that there's something just not right. And maybe it is, when you're going to the well year after year, like you've Mick Fitzsimons, you have Johnny Cooper, you have McCarthy, 7 and 8 All-Ireland medals. It's very, very difficult, to keep going time and time again, pushing the body all the time. Like, if Brian Fenton hasn't been beaten in Dublin Jersey since 2015, like, that's a serious amount of big games to be pushing yourself time and time again. So look, I'm very much with Billy. These are a really good side, and if Mayo do overcome them in the semi-final, they're going to have to get their very best to get over this Dublin team. I still think they've an awful lot left to say in this championship.
Well, to that point then, Billy, so Mayo will have the benefit of last year under their belts, and they like Croke Park, and a little bit of momentum now. They'll have a rattle at Dublin. Like, they'll be taking them on at the kickouts. They'll be trying to match them physically at every turn. Like, we're going to find out where Dublin are, you would think, to a fairly big extent against Mayo.
We will, yeah. Mayo will play as hard as they can. They'll pressure high up the field. They'll try and press the kick out. That's what they tried to do last year. That's what they have been doing all season. They'll really try and move the ball through the middle third. They'll use the athleticism that Mullen and Paddy Durkin have, that Matty Ruan has. They'll take risks at the back, so there may be goal opportunities for Dublin that there were not there because Kildare had so many defenders back, and they'll be really looking to the two young forwards and Tommy Conroy and Ryan O'Donoghue to see, can they challenge Fitzsimons and Cooper. They have a bit of speed maybe, which Mayo have gone to Croke Park and All-Ireland finals, maybe would not with the speed and the full forward line that they have now. But something tells me as a Mayo man to be cautious going into a game like that without Cillian O'Connor, with Chris Barrett retired, with Brendan Harrison, injured, Jason Doherty injured, and feeling that like you have a really good chance of turning them over. So I would urge caution in that regard. But they will be tested, and I expect it to be a good game of football. And I think that it's an important game in terms of the development of some of these Mayo young players to play. All right, the All-Ireland final last year was their first look at it for Oisin Mullen and Tommy Conroy and Eoin McLaughlin, players like that. Even Matty Ruan is only, establishing himself in the game, and the form he's in is going to be a really interesting battle against Brian Fenton. But in the summertime, in the middle, on really good conditions, Mayo will really just try and lay down a marker and see where they are.
Yeah.
And Dublin will have to react to that. But if any team has shown over the last number of years that they can raise their level to match somebody and go beyond, it's Dublin.
Yeah, I mean, it's still very, very hard to write them off in this championship, to say the least. I think they're probably still most people's favourites if you put a gun to their head. So Mayo Dublin's going to be Saturday, 14th of August, 6 p.m. Next day we'll have Kerry against Tyrone. Tyrone beating Monaghan then on Saturday in the Ulster final, 16 points to 15. They were a point to the good at the second half water break, and then Peter Hart kicked a point and McCurry had a free and a point, and that put them 4 clear. And then Monaghan came back into it, and Tyrone saw this one out, 16 points to 15. I mean, look, there's a lot with this game, and Tyrone were hit with COVID as well, Johnny, and that interrupted their preparation. The game within the game, obviously, is Niall Morgan and Rory Beggan. I mean, this is just fascinating stuff, like little glimpse of the future and where we're going to go. How much of this is really good innovation and it's really working for the teams, and how much of it is just like, I don't know, there's times I watch it and I think it's just for show a little bit, as in they're doing jobs other players could do, or it's a bit like in a game of football, soccer, where the midfielder's dropping in between the centre halves to take the ball and there's no need. You tell them just get up the pitch and, we can take care of that. So I'm torn on it. I definitely want to see where it goes and they'll get better at it. Where are you on the likes of Morgan and Beggan and how they're, revolutionising is a strong word, but I mean, they're taking this now to fairly gutsy heights.
They are, yeah. I'm not so sure it's for sure. I think both Monaghan and Monaghan and Tyrone spend too much time analysing and preparing, like any other team, for two lads to have, to be sort of bordering on being kamikaze in their approach. I thought at times Rory Beggan was very, very lucky. He got back at one stage and made a great tackle himself and flicked the ball up. But if that ended up in the back of the net and you're beaten by 2 points, you would be very, left with a lot of egg in your face. It means that a defender is dropping off, standing the goals. You could see maybe merit in it from a point of view of pushing up on the kick out.
Yeah.
That you're filling a gap for someone else. But you've got to be very, very sure. You've got to be very sure of your footballing ability, because in essence, you're becoming a 7 defender, which I don't have much problem with, but it only takes one of these to go wrong, and you're left with a lot of egg in your face. And you might get away earlier on the championship if that does happen, but you're going to, if it happens in an All-Ireland semi-final against Kerry, there's probably no way back. And I don't think you'll see Niall Morgan maybe being as brave, if that's the right word to use, with the Kerry forwards in the form they're in.
And there's no doubt, it was very effective. Morgan pushing up on Beggan's kickouts, Billy Joe at times, definitely got in Beggan's head and definitely was effective. There are other times where, Morgan, I think, was tracking, was it Andrew Woods at one stage, and you've Peter Hart in goal, and I started thinking, I'd probably, it's interesting. I mean, I'd probably swap you out for Peter Hart, though, at the same time. So, because I don't want to sound old school in this, I think it's really interesting, and there's always been, in a sport like this, where the keepers can play, exactly the same way as the outfield players, there's always been room for 1-2s and overloads overlaps when you're coming out with the ball, and you're kind of tightly man mark 6-on-6, you can create an overlap for sure. So we're at the beginning of where this is all going to go. What are you seeing at the moment?
Well, I agree with you, Joe. I think that particular passage of play, I was kind of mystified as to how Morgan ended up defending at the far 65, whereas somebody else, as you said, it was Peter Hart that was back in goals. I think that's unnecessary, and that just creates confusion. Now, maybe Brian Dooher will come back and say to me that was a plan and they'd worked on in training. Whereas, as Johnny mentioned there, pressurising the kick out is something that you think should be able to work out.
Yes.
Because if you're in goal, you can push a corner back further up the field, and you can maybe mark a space in the half-back line and fill out of space to stop a kick out.
Sorry to interrupt. It's also a set piece. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Like everyone knows what the thinking is and why you're here and why we're starting this way.
Yeah, but I suppose the surprising thing for me was that Monaghan didn't handle it well, and they'd seen it already this season because McNally, the Fermanagh goalkeeper, did this same thing against Monaghan where he came up and kind of swept over the midfield, so that kick out that Beggan likes to use where it goes over the top of everyone. So he took that kick out away, and Morgan was doing that again the last day. Now, I wasn't at the game, and it's much easier to see those things when you're in the stadium than watching on television.
Same with Mar and Dad today. It's meant a lot, you know. Again, I think it's hard to put into words what it meant to see their daughter on the highest stage of all, you know. To put into words how they feel is there's no way to do it, you know. I know both of them are extremely proud, happy, and just very, very excited for what's to come, you know. And I think my ma and dad have a huge role to play in Kelly's success in terms of where she is now, how she's got there, you know. Kelly's grown up saying, you know, the traits Kelly has, her personality. She's a pleaser, and she wants to help people, and she wants to see people do well. On the other side of that, she's a ferocious worker, you know. Nobody will outwork her, and they're the traits as kids we seen growing up. You know, we were growing up seeing my dad waking up at 4:30, 4:45 in the morning, getting his porridge and cycling 15-20 kilometres to Premier Derdies to work, coming home 6-7 in the night, having his dinner, rinse, repeat. You know, that's what we were used to seeing growing up. So the hard work trait and stuff like that comes from me dad, definitely. And in terms of my ma is, you know, she's a massive pleaser. She likes to please and help everybody. So I think Kelly's got a lovely mix of both of them combined, you know.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new